Chapter 479. In the picture, Jiang Xiu had already left Earth and was on his way back to the immortal Martial continent. His body and mind had suffered a huge blow and were in tatters. He was like a lone wolf licking his bleeding wounds by the edge of a swamp. The great fate art was too powerful. He couldn't resist it at all. Even if he was at his peak, he still couldn't resist. Otherwise, he would have rushed to the ancestral court and turned it upside down. He should ask the Divine Emperor why he used the great fate art. Back then, it was Cheng Lingsu who broke the engagement. Jiang Xiu didn't do anything wrong to her. He was a pitiful person who was abandoned. The winner had no reason to drag out the loser's corpse to whip. She should go and enjoy her happiness. According to Jiang Xiu's timeline, the two had crossed paths more than 3,000 years ago. The Divine Emperor must have lived for an even longer period of time. He must have experienced more people and things. The name Jiang Xiu should have been forgotten long ago. Could it be that he didn't use the great fate art for me? Cheng Lingsu could become the Divine Emperor. Cheng Lingren's talent wasn't inferior to hers at all. In fact, she was even more talented than her. Then what level would Cheng Lingren reach when she matured? Could it be that the Divine Emperor used the great fate art to deal with Cheng Lingren? In the fourth layer, the Divine Emperor stood on a lonely peak. Her feathers fluttered in the wind. Her face was gloomy as she watched Jiang Xiu leave alone. A line of clear tears rolled down her cheeks. Jiang Xiu, why are you leaving? Since you've already seen through Cheng Lingren's selfish, greedy, and insidious nature, why didn't you stop and turn around to look at me? Even if it's just a glance. The Divine Emperor's hand covered her heart. The maid on the side said nervously, Divine Emperor, your heartache is acting up again. The divine light in the sky slowly faded. Finally, Jiang Xiu disappeared from sight. No matter how powerful a person was, there would always be a limit to their spells. Jiang Xiu had already flown out of the sky of this universe and entered another world. He had walked this path once before. In his previous life, there was someone who had led him on this path. Although he couldn't remember it, he could still sense the direction of the immortal Martial continent. Jiang Xiu knew that he would be able to return there sooner or later, but he was a little tired now. Staring at a shattered astral stone, Qin Wentian's silhouette flickered as he appeared on top of it. After that, he sat down cross-legged on top of it. He wanted to recuperate, yet he didn't want to delay his journey. This was the best method because in his previous life, the person who brought him to the immortal Martial continent would do this when he was tired. This time, Jiang Xiu was meditating mainly to recuperate from his injuries. The hot blood thorn was indeed his nemesis, and the reason was because the longevity rune stone was restrained. If Jiang Xiu had abandoned his divine artifact, he wouldn't have this weakness. However, this weakness was also Jiang Xiu's greatest strength. The laws of this world were something that even the Almighty of the immortal Martial continent coveted. Just like the Great Destiny technique, it existed only in legends. How could Jiang Xiu be willing to abandon it? Moreover, if he abandoned his divine artifact, it would be equivalent to crippling it and starting from scratch. If he wasn't careful, he might even lose his life. Jiang Xiu was recuperating when he heard a strange sound. He opened his eyes. He didn't know how much time had passed. No one could tell him that his injuries were almost completely healed. It's the cosmic flying ship. There were many civilizations in the universe. There were immortal cultivation civilizations, technological civilizations, and even alchemy civilizations. Earth was originally developing towards a technological civilization. If this continued, it wouldn't be difficult for them to travel through the universe. However, the descent of a different world had forcibly changed the direction of immortal cultivation. The flying ship in the distance was like a gigantic cosmic life form. It was a metallic life form. The immortal Martial continent also had puppetry and mechanism techniques, but this cosmic flying ship was alive. Its speed was extremely astonishing. They were born to fly in the universe. If they were placed on a plane or a planet, they wouldn't be able to display their abilities at all. Seeing that the flying ship was flying in the same direction, Jiang Xiu hesitated whether he should extend his hand to stop it. If it could give him a ride, it might save him several years or even several decades of time. However, Jiang Xiu's current cultivation wasn't considered strong. If he were to encounter an expert, he might lose his life if he wasn't careful. However, the other party seemed to have seen Jiang Xiu as well. He approached the flying ship. "Subdue 100 energy crystals, and I'll give you a ride." He spoke in the most basic divine language. Jiang Xiu didn't know what energy crystals were. On Earth they used money. On the immortal martial continent, they used spirit stones. How could he have energy crystals as a currency? He shook his head. "I don't have money." "Where are you going?" "The immortal martial continent." The other party obviously hadn't heard of it. The immortal martial continent was really too far away. It was on the other side of the universe. Moreover, it was on another plane. It required special star orbits to gather and trigger a change in space-time. If one wanted to go to the immortal martial continent from here, the death rate was infinitely close to 100%. "Never heard of it. It's on another plane." The other party was somewhat surprised. "Come on up. I'll give you a ride." Okay. Jiang Xiu wasn't afraid. This path was originally extremely dangerous. Whether one could return or not required not only strength and determination, but also some luck. After entering the metallic lifeform's body, it was very spacious inside. Jiang Xiu didn't see anyone, only a shadow. He had never seen such a strange race before. "Thank you." The other party didn't say anything. He was able to let Jiang Xiu onto his flying ship. Of course, he didn't think that Jiang Xiu was a threat. His strength should be above Jiang Xiu's. "You're a god?" Jiang Xiu nodded. "Yes. Let me know when you need to get off the flying ship." After speaking, the other party fell into a deep sleep. He didn't seem to be able to leave the material world. When he walked, he would stick to the walls or the ground. It was very strange, as if he was liquid. However, Jiang Xiu could feel that he didn't have any ill intentions. In the universe, there were many kind-hearted people who weren't easy to kill. Of course, it was very difficult for this kind of race to survive. Their numbers would become fewer and fewer, but they would still exist. Jiang Xiu felt dizzy today. This should be a kind of kind-hearted, the kind that had a strong ability to survive. Whoosh! The cosmic flying ship traveled through the universe at lightning speed. The power brought about by its super speed crushed the nearby meteorites into pieces before they could hit it. It felt a little like Earth's atmosphere. After more than 10 days, Jiang Xiu sensed the end of this universe and said, "I'm going down." "Okay. Thank you for your help." After Jiang Xiu disembarked from the cosmic flying ship, the metallic lifeform flew into the distance and disappeared in an instant. A journey that would have taken more than 100 years was reached in just over 10 days. Jiang Xiu felt that his luck had turned a little. Next, he would have to wait for the star orbits to gather and produce an anomaly. No one would deliberately wait. Jiang Xiu could be considered the first person since ancient times. Generally, he would be swept up by undoubtedly. Back then, Jiang Xiu's master had said that he had been swept up by undoubtedly when he came to their world. Moreover, he had survived. "I'll have to depend on my luck." This had nothing to do with strength. It was just a matter of luck. However, Jiang Xiu firmly believed that he would be able to return because he had a similar experience once. After an unknown amount of time, Jiang Xiu waited for the star orbits to gather. He sat in the core area and blocked his 6 senses, not making the slightest bit of resistance. This was the smartest method. Many people would react when they were under external pressure. That would result in an even stronger suppression. Only by going with the flow would he be able to survive. Soon he felt incomparable dizziness. The intense feeling of weightlessness caused his brain to lose consciousness. His entire body lost all feeling. He lay in the universe like a god that had existed since ancient times. The star orbits revolved and the stars moved. After an unknown amount of time, his body suddenly disappeared into thin air. This sleep, Jiang Xiu felt as if he had slept for thousands of years. A rustling sound came from beside his ears. It was the sound of water droplets. He smelled very fresh air. This was no longer the universe. He slowly opened his eyes. What entered his vision was the azure sky, surrounded by green mountains and clear waters. What a familiar feeling. This This is the immortal martial continent. Jiang Xiu quickly climbed up from the ground. The familiar feeling of heaven and earth, as well as the surrounding plants and trees. How could he not recognize this place where he had lived for more than 3,000 years? I'm back. I, Jiang Luoxia, am back again. Jiang Xiu's long hair fluttered in the wind. His entire energy and spirit had returned. Although his cultivation base was still very far from his peak, he still had the great destiny art, the great god sealing art, and the world's laws. Tremble in the immortal martial continent. Chapter 480. It was still a mystery how wide the immortal martial continent was. There were some places that couldn't even be traversed. He really hoped that he could be closer to Qingzhou, where Tianqing School was located. After leaving the mountain, Jiang Xiu entered a nearby ancient city called Yunshan City. In the immortal martial continent, there were at least 1,000 cities called Yunshan City, if not 10,000. Jiang Xiu didn't know which province he was in for the time being. Stepping on the limestone bricks of the ancient city, Jiang Xiu thought of his own Tianqing School. He had lived on Earth for 5 or 6 years, then traveled through space and slept for a period of time, at least 10 years. A man wearing a bamboo hat and black clothes walked towards him. He asked, "Brother, what year is this?" The man sized up Jiang Xiu and said, "Holy Calendar 2918. Holy Calendar 2918? Jiang Xiu was stunned. He had left in the year 2858. He had actually left for 60 years, much longer than he had expected. It seemed that he had spent a lot of time sleeping in space. However, this was much faster than he had expected. He had even prepared to spend a few hundred years to return here. 60 years, 60 years. Jiang Xiu thought of something. Tianqing School had a rule that the school head had to appear within 60 years. This was the longest time limit. If the school head didn't appear after this time limit, the school would assume that something had happened to the school head. The school would then elect a new school head to avoid delaying the Tianqing School. If he hurried, he could still keep his position as the Tianqing School's school head. This was his master's greatest expectation for Jiang Xiu. Jiang Xiu had also worked hard to achieve it. He wouldn't let it go so easily. "Brother, I'll ask again. Which province is this?" "Hanzhou." Jiang Xiu let out a sigh of relief. Hanzhou and Qingzhou were separated by a province. Although they weren't close, it was much better than he had expected. He nodded slightly at Jiang Xiu and said, "Thank you." He looked up at the sky. It was misty and drizzling. According to the season in Hanzhou, it should be spring. He didn't know which year Jiang Xiu left, but it seemed a little cold. It was probably autumn. There were still a few months before the 60th year, so he should have enough time to rush back. He could write a memorial letter and ask the disciples to pick him up, but he had to face a big problem now. His cultivation was gone, and he was a far cry from his peak. The situation in the sect was complicated, and he hadn't come back for 60 years. Those ambitious people hoped that he would never come back, so he couldn't take this risk. The safest way was, of course, to return to Tianqing School after he recovered his strength, but he didn't know how long that would take. In addition, he also needed a lot of cultivation resources that the head of Tianqing School needed. He had to go back to Tianqing School. He soared into the air, turning into a streak of light as he flew off into the distance. A province in the immortal martial continent was much larger than the whole of Earth. He was still in good spirits, so he hurried on. When he reached Dashang, he would see if there was a way to get a flying magic tool. Jiang Xiu was exhausted after a full day's journey. The sky had also darkened, so he settled down in an ancient city. Apart from his weakened cultivation, he had another problem. He didn't have any money on him. As the head of Tianqing School, he obviously didn't need money. He was like a millionaire on Earth, but once he was in trouble, it would also become a big problem. "Porter, take me to the nearest inn." On the immortal martial continent, there were differences between immortals and mortals. Mortals lived in cities and were governed by countries and dynasties, while immortals hid in famous mountains or in natural wonders. The lives of mortals weren't much different from those of ancient times on Earth, but they all knew of the existence of immortals. However, those with immortal roots were 1 in 10,000. The nearby sects would also come to pick disciples, but the number was very small. As an immortal, Jiang Xiu still had an advantage in front of mortals. If he revealed his identity, most people would be respectful and reverent, calling him an immortal. However, Jiang Xiu, like Xiao Xuedong, didn't like to show his face. You want to stay at an inn? The porter sized up Jiang Xiu. Jiang Xiu's clothes were still the same as on Earth, but after traveling through the universe for so many years, his clothes had long been tattered. Only the disciples of the Bamboo Ink sect, who were similarly strange, would pay attention to him. This porter really didn't care. Yes, please. The porter was very unhappy. You want to take a carriage? Jiang Xiu's brows wrinkled. You don't want to take me? Even if he was the leader of the all-powerful Tianqing school, Jiang Xiu's cultivation could still be considered a young talent, but he was despised by a porter. Why don't you take a piss and look at yourself? You want me to take you? The porter said. You came to Loya City to beg for food, and still want to pretend to be a big shot. Let me give you a piece of advice. You don't fit here, and this place can't accommodate you. Go back to where you came from. Pauper. Jiang Xiu's expression didn't change. Indeed, he was now a pauper. If he couldn't rush back to the Tianqing school before the deadline, he would lose everything. Before on Earth, he didn't care about financial power, but here he cared very much. It was his lifeblood. Without the throne of the Tianqing school, he would lose a large number of cultivation resources. More importantly, he would also fail to live up to his master's cultivation. Go away, don't block my business. Jiang Xiu said. You're looking down on me. Yes, I'm looking down on you. What can you do? If you have the guts, throw money at me. Behind him was a brothel with red lights and green lights. From time to time, there were guests coming in and out. Seeing a beggar arguing with a porter, the guard at the door came over to chase them away. Go away. What are you arguing about? Get lost. The porter hurriedly said. Sir, it's not that I want to quarrel, it's this beggar who's looking for trouble. Boy, I think you're tired of living. The porter was very angry. He had offended the guard for no reason. He stretched out his hand as if he wanted to fight with Jiang Xiu. Another porter hurriedly came over and said, Little brother, don't quarrel with him. Are you looking for a place to stay? I'll take you there. Jiang Xiu said, Yes. I'll pull you. As he spoke, he pulled his bicycle over and gestured for Jiang Xiu to get on. Jiang Xiu coldly glanced at the porter and got on the bicycle. Let's go. The young man said, Little brother, the price of our inns in Luya City is not low. If you want to find a place to stay, it's better to stay in my house for a night. Jiang Xiu had no money. This young man was very kind to let him stay. What's your name? My surname is Qian, called Qianzhen. Jiang Xiu said. Thank you, Qianzhen. Qianzhen's home was a broken house. There was an old man at home. When he saw Qianzhen bring a friend back, he was very enthusiastic. He cooked 2 dishes and also made some of his own wine. Jiang Xiu, the house is only so big. I'll leave the big bed for you to sleep. I'll squeeze in with my father for a night. Jiang Xiu said. Good. Qianzhen, what do you wish for? Qianzhen said, Wish. It's nothing. This house is rented outside the Taoyuan. When I save enough money, I hope to buy it. In the future, I can open my own bicycle shop. Then, I will have no regrets in this life. Then I have saved 100 silver coins. He took out a wooden box from the bedside and opened it for Jiang Xiu to see. Jiang Xiu didn't know whether to laugh or cry. To be so sincere to a stranger, it was really simple. Jiang Xiu looked at the 100 silver coins, and his eyes lit up. This scene was just seen by Qianzhen's father. That night, after Qianzhen arranged for Jiang Xiu to rest, he went to his father's side room and saw his father pulling a long face. What's wrong? Qianzhen's father said. You are too trusting. Do you know what kind of person he is? You dare to show him the money. You can't show your wealth. No, although Jiang Xiu is poor, he should be a good person. How could he be greedy for other people's money? If you don't listen to your elders, you will suffer. Qianzhen didn't think so, but the thing that made Qianzhen endlessly regret happened. When he got up the next day, Jiang Xiu was gone from the big bed in the outer room. When he walked out of the courtyard, he was also gone. Gone. Qianzhen's heart skipped a beat. He immediately ran back to the bedside and took out the box. When he opened it, the broken silver coins inside were all gone. It was completely empty. It was a full 100 silver coins. The money he had saved for more than 10 years was all gone. Tianjin was dumbstruck. His heart sank to the bottom and regret filled his heart. Ai! He fiercely slapped his head. What's wrong? Tianjin's father came out of the room and saw the empty box on the ground. His eyes widened and he shouted, "Where's the silver?" Chapter 481. Silver, my silver. Tianjin's father cried out. For a poor family to buy a house with 100 taels of silver, it was even more difficult than saving money to buy a house on earth. The old man burst into tears on the spot. He was still hoping to sell the house and marry a wife for his son to carry on the family line. It's gone, it's all gone. Hearing the cries of the heavens and earth, the neighbors all ran over. They stood at the door and began to chatter. Several disheartened aunts walked into the yard and asked, "What happened to Tianjin's father?" "Silver, all of the silver is gone?" Tianjin's father recounted what happened yesterday. Tianjin crouched in front of the door with his head in his hands. He regretted his actions, but the price was too great. The money was stolen? Ha ha. A very discordant voice was heard as a tall and strong man walked over. It was the person who had quarreled with Jiang Xiu at the brothel's entrance last night. "I've already told you, that person is not a good person at first glance. He has no money and even needs to call a taxi. Tianjin, now you believe in your brother's eyes." The people on the side asked, "Wei Sun, what the hell is going on?" The man said, "Yesterday, a beggar came and asked me to take him to an inn. I could tell at a glance that he wasn't a good person. I wanted to beat him up, but Tianjin pretended to be a good person and stopped me. Tianjin even took him home to spend the night. In the end, the wind blew away an eggshell, and his many years of savings went down the drain." The people on the side sighed and said, "He met a bad person." Wei Sun said, "How is this meeting a bad person? This is simply the result of being a good person. Am I an evil person who bullies a beggar and Tianjin is a good person? Pretending to be righteous, I spit." An auntie said, Okay, let's not talk about it. Tianjin's lesson this time is tragic enough. I don't think he'll dare to pretend to be a good person in the future. How could they have any money to steal now?" There were those who sympathized with the Qian family, those who mocked them, and those who took pleasure in their misfortune. Tianjin only hugged his head as his body trembled. He had spent more than 10 years of pure money, waking up early and working late every day. In the past, he was able to endure it because of his age. But now he was in his 20s. In another 10 years he would be 40. How would he be able to buy a house, marry, and have children? "Have you reported this to the authorities?" "Go and report this to the authorities." The people from the government soon arrived. The Qian family placed all their hopes on the official. The official was very arrogant. He rode a tall horse and wore a red cloak. Inside, he wore a brocade robe with accessories hanging from his waist. He didn't even get off the horse. He just sat on the horse and asked questions, giving people a great sense of oppression. "Who is that?" Tianjin said. He said he was a passing guest and introduced himself as Jiang Xiu. Jiang Xiu? Jiang Luoxia was famous in the cultivation world, but Jiang Xiu's name was only known by his master and a few of his fellow disciples when he first entered Tianqing school. Outsiders didn't know that Jiang Xiu was Jiang Luoxia. Did he say where he was from? The father and son of the Qian family knew that the possibility of getting the money back was very small. The other party stole the money and didn't leave immediately. He didn't say anything. Then, how do you want us to investigate? Tianjin and his son helplessly lowered their heads. They were really unlucky. Father Qian was so angry that he picked up the shoulder pole and was about to hit his son. "Are you talking about me?" Suddenly a voice sounded. They saw a man in brocade robes slowly walking over. His long hair fluttered in the wind, and his face was perfect as if it was carved by a knife. Especially his eyes, they seemed to emit light. It was like he was a god. "It's you. Give me back my money." Father Qian and Tianjin rushed over. Father Qian used the shoulder pole to threaten Jiang Xiu. Jiang Xiu faintly smiled and said, Father Qian, don't worry. Here, I'll give you back. He took out 2 pieces of paper from his chest and handed them over. You dare to play with me? You want to exchange 2 pieces of paper for 100 taels of silver? Jiang Xiu said. If you can't read, then find someone who can. These 2 pieces of paper are land deeds. One is for your house, and the other is for Defu Cart Company. That night, Jiang Xiu couldn't sleep in Qianzhen's bed. Spiritual cultivation had suffered many blows on earth, but he had never been poor. The dirty and messy bed made him uncomfortable. As a result, he got up, but he didn't have any money. He borrowed money from Qianzhen and went to a brothel. There was a casino in the brothel, so he casually won some money and stayed in the brothel for the night. Well, what? Qianzhen was stunned. He took the land deed from Jiang Xiu. He could still understand some of the common words. This house will be yours in the future. The Fu Cart Company will also be yours in the future. Just a moment ago, they had treated Jiang Xiu as their greatest enemy. But now, the father and son were completely dumbfounded. This house was still all right. It was worth about 200 taels. The main thing was that the Defu Carriage Company had dozens of carriages and dozens of drivers. Qianzhen worked in this carriage company. Didn't this mean that he had become the boss of this carriage company? This is too precious. I can't accept it. Jiang Xiu laughed. This is what you deserve. I, Jiang Xiu, never owe anyone a favor. It's rare for you to lend me a helping hand when I'm down and out. I think it's too light. If Jiang Xiu had returned to Tianqing School and was still sitting on the throne of Tianqing School's sovereign, he would have thought of making Qianzhen an emperor. Accept it. Jiang Xiu's eyes swept over and saw Wei Sun, who had humiliated him yesterday. The latter was already stunned. Just a moment ago, he was still mocking and ridiculing Qianzhen for being a good person. In the end, he was slapped in the face. Congratulations, Qianzhen. Father Qian, your family is rich. Father Qian and Qianzhen were pleasantly surprised. They never thought that a moment of kindness would be exchanged for such a big return. Thank you, thank you. When the official saw Jiang Xiu's extraordinary bearing, he got down from his horse and asked, Who are you? Jiang Xiu said, I'm just passing by. Are you an immortal? Jiang Xiu smiled indifferently. He turned around and said to Qianzhen, Goodbye. After that, he turned around and flew away, instantly turning into a ray of light. Immortal, he's really an immortal. Hua, a commotion instantly broke out. Everyone present, even that awe-inspiring official who was draped in a cloak, fell to their knees and kowtowed incessantly. These people's reverence for immortals came from the depths of their bones and souls. Jiang Xiu is actually an immortal. Everyone present was envious. Qianzhen is really lucky to have taken in an immortal. Wei Sun's face was already pale. He had offended an immortal. The way the people around him looked at him changed. It was as if he had become moldy, and everyone was avoiding him. With money, Jiang Xiu's journey was easy. He crossed mountains and rivers. When he was tired, he could enter the ancient city to eat and drink. He had enough energy to continue his journey. In the blink of an eye, 3 days passed. Jiang Xiu entered the border of Hanzhou. This place was more troublesome. It was impossible to fly across the continuous mountains in a day. He could only stay in the mountains for the night. The continuous mountains were bound to be filled with demons. Unless there was a large sect here, it was a dangerous place. Ordinary rogue cultivators couldn't pass through. Jiang Xiu's realm was also quite dangerous. If he was unlucky and encountered a great demon, he would definitely be killed. In order to avoid risks, he flew for nearly 20 hours. When he was really tired, he landed in the mountains and took out some dry food to eat. In the distant horizon, 2 extremely fast lights were shooting. Jiang Xiu's heart immediately tightened. They were cultivators at the celestial immortal realm, which was equivalent to the god of heaven. My luck isn't too good? But when Jiang Xiu took a closer look, he couldn't help but feel relieved. The 2 weren't in the same group, but were enemies. One was a human and one was a demon. The demon's demonic aura soared to the sky, while the human was an immortal dressed in white. Great celestial immortal. Although Jiang Xiu's cultivation was gone, his vision was still there. When he saw the 2 fighting, He was shocked. Their cultivation was actually very high. They were actually great celestial immortals. With this kind of cultivation, they would be top experts in any province in the immortal martial continent. Even when Jiang Xiu was at his peak, he was only at this level. He was barely higher than them. Why are they fighting? At this level of great celestial immortal, whether human or demon, they were all famous people on the continent. Unless there was a huge conflict, they wouldn't kill each other. Chapter 482. A battle between grand celestial immortals. Moreover, it was between a human and a demon. Logically speaking, there shouldn't be too much interaction between them. Jiang Xiu's first thought was to fight over the treasure. Only the appearance of a rare treasure could possibly cause two grand celestial immortals to fight. Di Chongqing. I must obtain the demon core of a celestial immortal. If you hand it over, I can spare your life. That female celestial immortal's tone was extremely arrogant, causing Jiang Xiu to be somewhat speechless. The demon core of a demon was the same as the life-divine weapon of a god cultivator. If he handed over the demon core, his cultivation would be gone. What was the difference between that and taking his life? This female Taoist is truly ferocious. Jiang Xiu curiously sized her up. The immortal martial continent was truly too big, and there were simply too many sections. Jiang Xiu couldn't possibly know all of them. However, Jiang Xiu truly knew who this person in front of him was. That old ancestor behind the Jialan dynasty, one of the few loose immortals in the immortal martial continent. Jiang Xiu seemed to recall that her name seemed to be Xuelingyun. Jiang Xiu had also long heard of this person's great name. She had become famous much earlier than Jiang Xiu. Jiang Xiu was one of the most popular experts in the immortal martial continent in the recent 1,000 years, while the other party was a veteran expert. However, she was one of the 8 most famous loose immortals in the immortal martial continent. Loose immortals were unaffiliated cultivators who didn't belong to any sect. Loose immortals were a very unique race in the immortal martial continent. These people had a unique characteristic. They were either ridiculously strong or ridiculously weak. Very few of them were in the middle. This was because loose immortals didn't belong to any sect, and thus, they had no backing. It was very difficult for them to survive. And this person in front of him was undoubtedly ridiculously strong. When Jiang Xiu was at his peak, he was naturally stronger than her by a level. However, she was in existence even older than him. According to Jiang Xiu's knowledge, the Jialan dynasty had been established in Jia Prefecture for tens of thousands of years. When Jiang Xiu was still a young minor repairs immortal in the Tianqing school, he had already heard of the Jialan dynasty in Jia Prefecture. As expected of his reputation, he actually dared to directly ask for a demon core from a celestial immortal. However, it seemed that the great demon wasn't simple either. The two of them were locked in battle. On the surface, the greater demon named Di Chongqing seemed to have the upper hand. The black smoke coming out of his saber was accompanied by crackling electric currents. It was as if even the void was being sliced apart. Many demonic cores were materials for refining top-grade Dharma artifacts and elixirs. Some demonic cores could even be used to save lives. Xuelingyun was here for the demonic cores, and her goal was none other than these. Di Chongqing, this name sounds a little familiar. In the immortal martial continent, it could be said that demons and immortals were one side of righteousness and one side of evil. Since ancient times, demons had always wanted to kill and harm others, while immortals were born to protect humans. Hence, the two sides couldn't coexist. Even now, there were still some old fogies who used this as an excuse. However, Jiang Xiu didn't see it this way. What was righteous and what was evil? Maybe he had heard about it from an old friend. This was definitely a grand battle that was rarely seen. No matter where it was, it would surely cause a huge commotion. Although Jiang Xiu was the one who witnessed it, this wasn't a good thing either. There were some things that experts weren't willing to let others know. And the consequences of knowing this would be extremely dire. If things didn't turn out well, they might even be silenced. Sky desolation / Di Chongqing's entire body was shrouded in black smoke. His sword flashed as his silhouette was so fast that it left no traces behind. Demons, compared to humans and gods, had a lower level of comprehension towards weapons. This was especially so for the Tao of the sword. It was more dependent on one's physique and innate techniques. It was truly extremely rare for someone to be able to cultivate the Tao of the sword to such a level. Rip. A black-colored sword light flashed, leaving behind a sword beam of light that was over 1,000 meters long, forcibly splitting the sky apart. Di Chongqing's countenance drastically changed as he abruptly inclined his head. A blurry white silhouette flashed as Xue Lingyun's slender white hand blasted out. Imperial Qi covered the vast sky. With a boom, a violent palm force blasted out. At this moment, even Jiang Xiu, who was far away on the ground, could feel an incomparably intense pressure. Only then did he see a burst of energy gushing out from her palm, blotting out the sky with resplendent light. It was like a pillar of light. When the powerful shockwave came crashing down, even the trees that were tens of meters tall were bent over from the pressure. Damn. Jiang Xiu couldn't help but curse. Right now he was just a tender little fellow in front of these two great gods. If it wasn't for the fact that they were so far away, this palm strike might have even threatened Jiang Xiu's life. He immediately rushed towards the distance. He saw a cave over there. With a swoosh he dived into it. The moment he entered, he heard a loud boom outside. The place he was at earlier had collapsed by tens of meters. Looking down from the sky, it was a gigantic palm imprint. Strong. Judging from Jiang Xiu's previous height, the power of Xue Lingyun's palm strike was really amazing. Even Jiang Luoxia, who was at the great celestial immortal realm, couldn't take it head-on. The 8 great individual immortals weren't just for show. When he looked up again, the two of them had already exchanged dozens of blows in the sky. The earth-shattering movements were as if the sky and earth were collapsing. However, Jiang Xiu watched carefully and frowned tightly. Although he had some friendship with some great demons, he was still a human after all. In his heart, he was still biased toward Xue Lingyun's victory. Moreover, when he was still a disciple of Tianqing School, there was a year when the Tianqing School's celebration was held. The Jialan dynasty also sent a prince to congratulate them. Jiang Xiu remembered very clearly that it was his master who came out to welcome them. They could be considered to have some interactions. However, Xue Lingyun was in a very bad situation. She was very strong. This might have something to do with the fact that she had been in a superior position for a long time, and hadn't fought with others for too long. She had been attacking with all her might, but she just couldn't take her down. If she couldn't take her down after a long time, she would definitely lose. It could be said that Xue Lingyun was already showing signs of defeat. Damn. Di Chongqing's eyes burst out with a terrifying red light. He uncharacteristically used his sword to meet Xue Lingyun's shocking palm. With a boom, the two forces fiercely collided. Light flashed, and a trace of panic appeared on Xue Lingyun's face. Little girl, you've already used up all your methods, but this king has yet to use my methods. Xue Lingyun coldly snorted. The magic power in her palm suddenly spat out, pressing down on the longsword. The light became even more dazzling. Stop struggling. You've already lost. You know it in your heart. Ha ha ha. The flesh of a great celestial immortal is very delicious to devour. This king's cultivation will definitely rise to another level. Dream on. Xue Lingyun mumbled something. Her left hand formed a sword and pressed against the back of her right hand, drawing a mysterious rune. But just as the rune was about to be completed, she saw Di Chongqing's mouth abruptly open. A violent beam of light shot out like a rocket launcher. The innate talent of the demon race revealed its superiority at this moment. Xue Lingyun couldn't dodge in time. She saw the fierce beam of light instantly penetrating her body. Her face revealed a painful expression. Her entire body seemed to have lost all strength and fell down. However, Di Chongqing seemed to be unable to control this powerful divine ability. The strong beam of light continued to burst out from his mouth. He couldn't stop it even if he wanted to. From the looks of it, although this divine ability was powerful, it was somewhat clumsy. Perhaps this was the reason why Xue Lingyun dared to use her full strength. Damn it. Jiang Xiu couldn't help but curse. When Xue Lingyun fell from the sky, she lost control of her body and was blown by the wind. Coincidentally, she fell in the area where Jiang Xiu was, just tens of meters in front of him. At this moment, he finally saw clearly. Her clothes were as white as snow and there were feathers on her head. She was truly beautiful. Especially her figure. It was even more curvaceous when she fell to the ground. It was as if she was showing Jiang Xiu some unfathomable heavenly secret. Her towering chest was still heaving up and down with great effort. She was still alive. What should I do? Jiang Xiu didn't even have time to hesitate. Di Chongqing would soon come down to finish the job and collect the spoils of war. If Jiang Xiu didn't save her now, he wouldn't have the chance. Because of the incident with the 2 pearls of the Chung family, Jiang Xiu's feelings were not small. He was somewhat resistant to females, especially when the time between them was not far. His anger had yet to dissipate. However, an animal would always be an animal. He rushed over without any hesitation. He carried Xue Lingyun and flew away in a flash. This mountain was definitely Di Chongqing's territory. If Jiang Xiu stayed in the vicinity, especially near the battlefield, Di Chongqing would quickly find him. He had to leave as soon as possible and find a place with a water source. It would be easier for him to hide Xingzong. Xue Lingyun, who was in his arms, had already fainted. Chapter 483. The mountain region was vast, and the forest was dense. It wasn't easy to find a person, especially for someone like Jiang Xiu who was experienced in the martial world. He knew which places weren't easy to find. After hurrying for a while, they saw several continuous waterfalls. Looking from afar, it looked like a water dragon plunging into the mountain. The sound of water filled the sky and earth. He immediately jumped down with Xue Lingyun and passed through the water. The water curtain blocked the line of sight. The sound of water disturbed the sound, and the water vapor covered the smell. It was an excellent hiding spot. The only drawback was that it was a little too conspicuous. However, the mountain was so big that it wasn't easy to notice this place. How are you? Xue Lingyun had completely fainted and lost consciousness. Jiang Xiu grabbed her pulse and felt it. Jiang Xiu was a decent alchemist. To become an alchemist, one had to have a certain level of understanding of pharmacology and pathology. Unexpectedly, although her entire body was penetrated by the strong light and she did suffer some internal injuries, it was far from being incurable as Jiang Xiu thought. It looked like Xue Lingyun should have activated a protective secret art at the last moment and protected her heart meridians. Jiang Xiu searched her body without holding back. Generally speaking, one would definitely bring alchemical pills when going out, especially when facing an expert. With this search, he found a small storage pouch from her waist. With a shake, the bottles and jars inside all fell out. Yellow dragon pill, 100 grass immortal pill, gold essence pill. These alchemical pills would be a huge fortune in the hands of anyone. Even if it was in Jiang Xiu's hands now, it would be enough for him to exchange for future cultivation resources. The grand ancestor of the Jialan Empire was indeed generous. Found it. Clear bone jade fluid. Jiang Xiu picked her up and gently opened her small bloody mouth. He poured the clear bone jade fluid into her mouth. The fluid emitted a tempting fragrance. After taking a whiff, Jiang Xiu felt refreshed. The fragrance was very strong, but Jiang Xiu wasn't worried about being discovered. The surroundings were all covered by water vapor. After feeding her the medicine, Jiang Xiu helped her to sit cross-legged and combed the meridians in her hands. There was an external divine power entering her body. The abnormal feeling made Xue Lingyun react a little. She opened her red lips slightly, and a strange moan came out of her nose. It seemed like she wanted to struggle. Don't move. I'm treating your injuries. Perhaps his words had an effect, or perhaps Xue Lingyun's consciousness was still completely muddled. Her internal injuries were still very serious. Jiang Xiu used the Tianqing school's secret technique to tease her for a few hours. He only stopped when Jiang Xiu was a little tired. Spiritual cultivation was to strengthen oneself and heal external injuries. Unless it was a healing-type protoss, it was very weak. In this aspect, it still couldn't be compared to the neutral and peaceful immortal cultivation. The secret technique also changed under his divine power, and its effects weren't as outstanding. In addition, when he carried Xue Tianxian through the waterfall, her entire body was wet. Her clothes stuck to her body, and her sparkling, snow-like skin was exposed. This also greatly interfered with the will of spiritual cultivation. Water, water. Jiang Xiu cupped a bit of water in his hand and brought it to her mouth. The famous Xue Lingyun actually stuck out her tongue and licked because she couldn't drink it. She was like a little domestic dog. If she remembered this after waking up, she would definitely kill Jiang Xiu to silence him. After drinking the water, she peacefully fell asleep. Seeing that her condition had stabilized, Jiang Xiu ran outside. There seemed to be a big commotion outside. Many demons appeared, flying in the sky and crawling on the ground. If he wasn't wrong, that Di Chongqing had sent his subordinates to search for Xue Lingyun. This made Jiang Xiu frown. It seemed that Di Chongqing was very confident in his attack. He actually guessed that Xue Lingyun's injuries were so serious that she couldn't escape from this mountain. This was troublesome. After all, this was his territory. If he sent so many demons to search, they would be discovered sooner or later. Thinking of this, Jiang Xiu began to set up a formation outside the area they were in. Although these demons' intelligence wasn't low, their understanding of formations was close to zero. Only a small number of intelligent demons would know. This wasn't difficult for them, but it was too annoying. Formations were too difficult for human immortal cultivators to learn. The main thing was that it was too detailed and troublesome. Once one learned it, it would be even more difficult to understand and would take up a lot of cultivation time. If it wasn't for the fact that Jiang Xiu had to have a certain level of understanding of formations in order to fight for the position of Tianqing School's headmaster, he definitely wouldn't have learned it. But after learning it, it was very useful. It added a bit of talent to the name Jiang Luoxia. What he was setting up now wasn't any complicated formation. Firstly, his cultivation base wasn't high enough. Secondly, wouldn't it cost him 300 taels of silver to set up a formation? He was playing with a small illusion formation that would make them lose their sense of direction and take a detour, thinking that they had searched this area. Not long after he finished setting it up, Jiang Xiu returned to the waterfall cave and saw a group of demons outside. They looked around and even used their noses to sniff around. Some demons had extremely sensitive noses. Even the water vapor in the air couldn't be suppressed. Although they felt that something was amiss, they didn't see anything. After they searched the area, they turned around and flew away. Jiang Xiu couldn't help but heave a sigh of relief. In truth, at that moment, Jiang Xiu's killing intent surged forth. With his current strength, it would be very difficult for him to deal with ordinary demons. Moreover, if he was discovered, Di Chongqing would arrive in an instant. His life would be in danger at any moment. Amen. Suddenly, there was movement behind him. Jiang Xiu turned around and saw Xue Lingyun pressing on her wound and propping herself up. Her face was pale and her lips were dry. "You were the one who saved this lord. Xiu, be softer." After spending 5 to 6 years on Earth, Jiang Xiu had already thrown away most of his arrogance as a sect leader. When he first came to Earth, he was always putting on airs and would often call himself this lord. The Xue Lingyun in front of him was just a replica of him. Actually, it was very tiring to put on airs. He just wanted to increase his aura. Xue Lingyun obediently shut her mouth. "You're awake. How do you feel?" Xue Lingyun said. "This lord is fine." Jiang Xiu couldn't help but laugh. "It's very tiring to put on airs. Actually, your injuries weren't light. When I was healing you, she was like a helpless lamb." Xue Lingyun's expression changed. She lowered her head and looked at her clothes. She actually reached out and grabbed her collar. No matter how strong a woman was, she would always show a weak side in this aspect. "What did you do to me?" Jiang Xiu said. "What did I do to you? Can't you feel it?" Xue Lingyun's expression became even more unsightly. "You took advantage of me? Despicable." As she spoke, she raised her palm. Her palm instantly shone with a white light. That white light was enough to split gold and break jade. She was actually about to attack Jiang Xiu. Jiang Xiu said, "Hey, what are you feeling? Did you have some kind of dream that you shouldn't have and you're blaming it on me?" "Nonsense," Jiang Xiu said. "Don't worry, I didn't touch you at all. I was just helping you heal." Xue Lingyun half believed and half doubtfully turned around. With her back facing Jiang Xiu, she rolled up her sleeves and took a look. Only then did she feel relieved and turned around. This lord misunderstood you. Little fellow, what's your name? Little fellow? Jiang Xiu didn't know whether to laugh or cry. He had more than 3,000 years of cultivation, and was the sect master of Tianqing school. With his seniority, many Tianqing school disciples had to call him ancestor when they saw him. Now he was actually being called a little fellow. However, Xuelingyun was indeed his senior. My name is Jiang Xiu, Xuelingyun said. Jiang Xiu, this lord will remember your name. If we can escape this disaster this time, I will definitely repay you tenfold, 100-fold. Jiang Xiu only smiled faintly. If he could return to Tianqing school and become the sect master again, the small Jialan dynasty wouldn't be worth mentioning at all. There was no need for him to repay her. If he really lost the position of sect master, the small Jialan dynasty wouldn't be able to help him. Which sect are you from? Jiang Xiu said. Tianqing school. He blurted it out in a moment. After saying it, Jiang Xiu felt a bit of regret. Tianqing school? That's a big sect. Tianqing school also has divine cultivators? Jiang Xiu said. Aren't I one? There will be more in the future. He had the highest spiritual cultivation technique in his hands, the Great God Sealing technique. This was already far above Tianqing school's immortal cultivation technique. After he returned, he would definitely recruit spiritual cultivation disciples and strengthen Tianqing school. It seems that Sect Master Ji will make a big move after inheriting the position. Sect Master Ji? Which sect master? Jiang Xiu's heart thumped. The Jidao sect. Are you really from Tianqing school or not? You don't even know the name of your own sect master? Jiang Xiu's head buzzed. The Jidao sect had always been his biggest rival for the position of sect master. There was no reason for the elders to let him inherit the position of sect master in less than 60 years. The Tianqing school's sect master is Jiang Luoxia. Jiang Luoxia. Sect Master Jiang has been missing for many years. Some people say he's dead. The Jidao sect ascended the position more than 10 years ago. How could this be? Seeing Jiang Xiu's dazed expression, Xuelingyun said. You should have left the sect for a long time, right? You don't even know that the sect master has changed? Jiang Xiu wanted to tell her loudly that he was Jiang Luoxia, but the words stopped at the tip of his tongue. If the Jidao sect found out that he was still alive, and that his strength had greatly decreased, they would definitely take his life. Chenglingsu, you've harmed me. Chapter 484. The first of the 3,000 Daos, the Great Fate technique, had brought him back to his youth. It was indeed unimaginable and shocking, but it had caused Jiang Xiu to give up the position of sect leader that he had spent so much effort on. Stepping over mountains of corpses and seas of blood, and sacrificing countless people. When Jiang Xiu had ascended to the position of sect leader, he had said to his fellow disciples who had died for him, that they could all rest in peace. But now, how could he let them rest in peace? He was even more ashamed to face his master who had placed such high hopes on him. Lost, Xuelingyun said. Lost? What do you mean lost? Are you feeling sad because your Jiang Luoxia lost the position of sect leader? Forget it, little guy, you should take care of yourself. How can you care about something like changing the sect leader? Jiang Xiu didn't know whether to laugh or cry. If he couldn't care, who could? Jiang Xiu didn't say anything. Xuelingyun, who had always been high and mighty, also couldn't put down her pride to comfort him. She had only spoken a few words to him because Jiang Xiu had saved her. Otherwise, with Jiang Xiu's level, it would be a blessing accumulated from 8 lifetimes for her to even look at him. Now Jiang Xiu was only an upper earth god. Above him were the heavenly gods, which were also divided into 3 stages: lower heavenly gods, middle heavenly gods, upper heavenly gods, and above them was the great heavenly gods, which was the perfection stage of deity. There was a difference of 5 minor levels, a difference of 3 major levels. At first, it didn't sound like a big difference, but in reality, in the eyes of the immortal Martial Continent's cultivators, this difference was 108,000 times. A difference of 1 minor level could be instantly killed, and the further one progressed, the greater the difference. This was because the power of one's level increased geometrically. If the difference between a lower heavenly god and a middle heavenly god was 10 times, Then the difference between a lower heavenly god and an upper heavenly god was 10 times. And the difference between a lower heavenly god and an upper heavenly god was hundreds of millions of times. Similarly, the difficulty of cultivation was just as great as the difference in strength. Therefore, in Shui Lingyun's eyes, Jiang Xiu was just a little guy. At her level, she could kill the current Jiang Xiu with a flick of her finger. The sound of the heavenly waterfall was extremely loud, the water cascading downwards. From afar, the sunlight cascaded down, merging together with the spiritual qi of the heavens and earth, causing the waterfall to glow with resplendent rainbow-colored light. The scene was extremely beautiful. However, in Jiang Xiu's eyes, the world was black and white. At this moment, he felt like he was back 3,000 years ago, when he was brought to the immortal martial continent by his master. He couldn't see a trace of hope, and could only treat everything with indifference. "Hey, little guy, do you have anything to eat?" Jiang Xiu looked back, and saw Shui Lingyun sitting cross-legged with her back straight. Her beautiful eyes fell on Jiang Xiu. "Don't you have any fasting pills on you?" Shui Lingyun shook his head. An expert of her level would definitely carry it with her. Only a commoner like Jiang Xiu would be unable to rid himself of his greed for food. "I'll go out and hunt some game." Shui Lingyun moved her lips. "Don't worry, if I were to betray you, I wouldn't have saved you." Shui Lingyun continued. "That's not what I meant. I just want you to be more careful. Di Chongqing wouldn't give up on searching for you." Amen. After leaving the waterfall, he glanced at the fish swimming in the pond. He hesitated for a moment, and gave up on the idea of fishing. It was better to hunt small wild beasts. Maybe there would be some fish in the water that would report to Di Chongqing. In the mountains, he hunted a wild wolf. He only chopped off 2 of its legs and buried the corpse. These 2 wolf legs could last him for a few days if he used them sparingly. When Jiang Xiu returned to the waterfall, Shui Lingyun was in a fluster. Jiang Xiu hurriedly turned around, and saw that Shui Lingyun's clothes were undone, revealing her pure white back. He could faintly see the beautiful outline of her chest. So it turned out that there was a sword wound on her lower ribs. Jiang Xiu didn't notice it. This couldn't be blamed on Jiang Xiu's carelessness. It was just that this sword wound was strange. It wasn't a sharp cut with blood flowing out. Instead, it was a little charred. Di Chongqing's special sword appeared in his mind. "So sorry." Jiang Xiu apologized like a virgin. Although he saved her, these cultivators had strange temperaments. If they were to avoid such things, they might even kill him out of anger. Shui Lingyun's strength was weak now. She wasn't really hungry. She only sent Jiang Xiu away to check her wound. However, her injury was far more complicated than she imagined. She was born in a noble family, and was a genius since young. She abided by etiquette and had never crossed the line with men. She wholeheartedly pursued the Tao. Now that Jiang Xiu saw something he shouldn't see, she was both shocked and angered. However, the sword poison in her body was acting up, and she didn't have the slightest bit of strength. She tried to button her clothes several times but failed. Shui Lingyun was both embarrassed and angry. Initially, she felt that Jiang Xiu was a good person. But now he actually spied on her. What she was more worried about was that the lust of men would be ignited and explode like a bomb. Demons would instantly possess her body and do things like beasts. She had no way to resist. In her panic, she actually fainted on the ground. Oi oi, Jiang Xiu heard the commotion. She seemed to have fainted, but he didn't dare to be sure. After calling out a few times and getting no response, he turned around and saw that she had fainted on the ground. Should I save her or not? If I save her, I'll definitely offend her and she might really kill me. It's too foolish to sacrifice your life for the pagoda. If I don't save her, Shui Lingyun might lose her life. Should I save her, or should I save her? Jiang Xiu was truly curious. What sword did she use? Why was it so strange? It actually managed to fool his eyes. Save her, at most I'll just flee later. He inspected her wound. Under her snow-white skin, there was a charred blackness. The problem wasn't that it was charred, but rather, it was more like it was colored. The law of darkness is contained within the wound. It seems to be caused by the Black Fault Sword. Could it be the Black Fault Sword? The Black Fault Sword was one of the 13 famed swords of the immortal martial continent. It contained the complete law of darkness within. This is troublesome, Jiang Xiu muttered to himself. If it was in the past, he really wouldn't have a solution. But now, he had the law of this world and could directly summon the law of darkness. He mumbled something, and a golden light flashed from his finger. He tapped on Xue Lingyun's wound, and the surging black aura stopped. Time seemed to have stopped at that spot. Jiang Xiu sliced the wound open, and the intense black aura gushed out. There were probably no more than 5 people in the entire immortal martial continent who didn't rely on their cultivation level and used medical techniques to treat a complete law of darkness. Now Jiang Xiu was one of them. Gee, the black aura gushed out continuously, and only stopped after a few seconds. Only then did the skin return to normal, and blood flowed out. And, originally, there was only one wound, but later he realized he was wrong. Xue Lingyun had more than 10 sword wounds all over her body. The one just now was the most serious, and the rest were just small wounds. But because of the complete law of darkness, it was impossible to not treat it. Originally, with Xue Lingyun's cultivation level, she could have destroyed the invading power. But with her injuries so severe, it was impossible to not rely on external forces. In the end, Jiang Xiu cut more than 10 wounds on her body, and used the same method to cleanse the law of darkness. He then found the jade skin plaster from her elixirs. After doing all this, Jiang Xiu made a fire, cleaned up the wolf's leg, and slowly roasted it. Late at night, Jiang Xiu heard the commotion and said, "The force from your sword wounds has been released. You should be fine now." When he turned his head to look at Xue Lingyun, their eyes met. Xue Lingyun's pale face actually flushed red. Jiang Xiu understood that she was abnormal. He was quite worried that this high and mighty ancestor of the Jialan dynasty would go berserk and kill someone. From the looks of it now, that shouldn't happen. Xue Lingyun said softly, "You know how to treat Heikei's sword wounds?" "I don't." Jiang Xiu smiled. A blind cat pretending to be a dead mouse. The fire burned brightly, and the firewood inside crackled, making the surroundings very warm. This place was only so big, and Xue Lingyun accidentally met Jiang Xiu's eyes again. Her delicate body trembled slightly, and she turned her head away. Jiang Xiu was a bit embarrassed. "Didn't you say you were hungry? I brought some wolf meat for you to eat." Xue Lingyun agreed and took it. She took small bites and said with a frown, "Why is there no taste?" "You didn't put salt?" Jiang Xiu laughed. "You are the high and mighty ancestor of the dynasty. How would you know the suffering of us commoners? It's good enough to have something to eat." Xue Lingyun's expression changed slightly. These words were a bit harsh to her ears, but she didn't say anything. Jiang Xiu quickly finished his wolf. He said it would be good for a few days, but he really couldn't resist the needs of his current god cultivation body. Xue Lingyun said, "I'm full." She put the wolf leg to the side as she spoke. "Don't waste." Jiang Xiu picked it up and started chewing. However, Xue Lingyun was very attentive to Jiang Xiu's actions. Now that Jiang Xiu's lips were on the place her cherry lips touched just now, she couldn't help but blush. She secretly wondered if he was doing it on purpose. With this look, Jiang Xiu's gaze also swept over. Their eyes met, but Xue Lingyun was a bit flustered. She didn't understand. She had faced so many people before, and had always been calm and composed. Why did she feel like her heart was racing when facing this little fellow's gaze today? Chapter 485. Jiang Xiu thought that she was still embarrassed about what happened just now and said, "I wasn't mocking you. Everyone's environment is different, and their understanding of the world is different. Poor people will never understand what kind of life you live." Xue Lingyun made a sound of acknowledgement and then asked softly, "You were able to resolve Heikei's sword qi. How did you have such ability? There's actually an expert in this field in Tianqing School?" This was what she had always wanted to know. The reason why Heikei was ranked on the sword ranking was because of its tyrannical sword qi. Its destructive power was too strong, and the number of people in the immortal martial continent who could resolve it was very few. Jiang Xiu being able to do it, in Xue Lingyun's eyes, was a very inconceivable thing. Jiang Xiu said, "It's really like a blind cat running into a dead mouse." Shui Lingyun frowned slightly. If you don't want to say, then this sovereign won't know. However, the tone of his voice was not overbearing. Instead, there was a hint of bitterness. Yes, bitterness. Jiang Xiu said. Your injuries are still very serious. I estimate that you'll need 3 to 5 days to recover. Don't tell me that I have to stay in this damned place for 3 to 5 days? For someone like her who lived like a princess, this was a bit difficult to adapt to. That's right. Jiang Xiu said. If you don't recover from your injuries, once you show yourself, you'll be discovered by Di Changqing. At that time, I'm afraid that you'll be buried here for a long time. Shui Lingyun's face revealed a vexed expression. It's all my fault for being careless and falling into his trap. If I were to fight with him again, I have a 70% chance of winning. Jiang Xiu smiled and did not say anything. After that, Jiang Xiu went to sleep and Shui Lingyun made use of the time to heal her injuries. The night was silent. When she woke up the next day, bright sunlight shone in from outside. Shui Lingyun did not know how long it had been, but she felt a warm coat draped over her body. It was Jiang Xiu's clothes. The bonfire on the side had already been extinguished, but there was no sign of Jiang Xiu. She dragged her sick body outside and saw Jiang Xiu standing in the distance, not knowing how to absorb. She tidied her hair, washed her face and rinsed her mouth. After finishing everything, she looked as if she had just come out of the cave. To be honest, when she didn't see Jiang Xiu just now, she thought that Jiang Xiu had left. She felt very disappointed, but when she saw him outside, she felt a burst of joy. Just as he was about to open his mouth to speak, he pulled on his wound and let out a muffled groan. You're awake, Jiang Xiu said. Like I said, you have to hurry up and recover. Moving around will affect your recovery. Although his tone wasn't kind, Shui Lingyun couldn't refute him. At the same time, she also felt a burst of concern and warmth. Softly she said, This sovereign is just, Jiang Xiu said. Go back and rest or seize the time to meditate. Leave everything to me. Yes. Beside Jiang Xiu were 2 more legs of wild beasts. After he went in, he started a bonfire to barbecue them. The smoke inside couldn't float out, so Jiang Xiu didn't have to worry about being discovered by the birds. What are your plans in the future? Are you still going back to Tianqing school? Jiang Xiu pondered in his heart. He had thought about this before. He couldn't go back to Tianqing school, and he couldn't even spread the news that he was still alive. Otherwise, his fellow apprentices and disciples would be in danger. The Jidao sect wouldn't give Jiang Xiu a chance to make a comeback, and his people were Jiang Xiu's capital. The Jidao sect would definitely destroy them. I'm not going back, Shui Lingyun asked. Then where will you go in the future? Jiang Xiu had nowhere to call home, but everywhere was home. He shook his head and asked, Oh right, why do you want Di Changqing's beast core? That's a great celestial immortal level beast, the same as you. This decision is very risky. Shui Lingyun didn't answer. She was clearly afraid. Jiang Xiu said, You want a beast core of the same level, and one of the great celestial immortal level at that. Of course it's not for money. It's not hard to guess. If it's not to save someone, then it's to break through. You should be the latter. Shui Lingyun was stunned. Jiang Xiu's indifferent face had a strong sense of confidence, but she couldn't help but admit that Jiang Xiu guessed correctly. I've been stuck at the great celestial immortal level for many years, and I undoubtedly obtained a secret technique that can help me break through to the immortal king level. However, I need a great celestial beast core. You can see this point. You're really extraordinary. As expected of a disciple of a famous sect. She didn't know that Jiang Xiu was able to take that step and become the 17th immortal king of Tianqing school, because he used a method similar to Shui Lingyun's. However, Jiang Xiu didn't expect that the immortal king level would be his final shackle. What are you planning to do next? Shui Lingyun's eyes were filled with determination. I'm definitely going to kill Di Changqing. Once I've recovered, I'll find him and settle the score. Jiang Xiu asked, Are you confident? I've already said that I have a 70% chance of winning. Jiang Xiu laughed in his heart. This ancestor of the Jialan dynasty wasn't young, but her understanding of demons was limited. She should be the type of person who was obsessed with cultivation. And not someone like Jiang Xiu who killed his way up. Di Chongqing wouldn't reveal his trump card so easily, unless you were forced into a desperate situation. However, from Jiang Xiu's perspective, Di Chongqing definitely wasn't in a desperate situation. If he didn't have the Black Fault sword, he wouldn't be a match for me at all. From Jiang Xiu's perspective, Xue Lingyun's chances of winning against Di Chongqing didn't exceed 30%. It might even be lower. However, he knew that even if he said this, Xue Lingyun wouldn't believe him. From time to time, flocks of flying beasts could be seen flying in the sky. It seemed like Di Chongqing hadn't given up on searching. He was very confident in himself and was sure that Xue Lingyun was still in the mountains. Still haven't found her? In the sky, Di Chongqing's entire body was shrouded in black smoke. One could only vaguely see the outline of a human. His aura was extremely powerful, enveloping a large portion of the sky. No, a man at the side was so ashamed that he couldn't raise his head. We've already searched the entire mountain. Could it be that she's already escaped? Di Chongqing shook his head and said, impossible. She's heavily injured. She must still be in the mountains. Continue searching. Yes. After roasting the meat, Jiang Xiu passed it over. This time, Xue Lingyun didn't say that it was tasteless. However, after a while, her expression became strange. She wanted to say something but hesitated. She twisted her body and looked left and right. Then she glanced at Jiang Xiu. Strangely, this high and mighty Canaan dynasty ancestor's face flushed red. She lightly bit her red lips. Was she feeling uneasy? Jiang Xiu asked curiously, what's wrong? After being asked by Jiang Xiu, she became even more unnatural. She turned her head and hesitated for a while. Then she said in a voice that only she could hear, I want to relieve myself. Jiang Xiu was stunned for a moment. Xue Lingyun was indeed very shy, but Jiang Xiu was also very embarrassed. She could have completely found a place to settle it by herself, but she had just been reprimanded by Jiang Xiu not to wander around. And in the end, such an embarrassing thing had happened. Jiang Xiu said, can you do it yourself? Xue Lingyun nodded and lowered her head. She got up and walked out. Relieving herself in the wild was probably this ancestor's first time. When she came back, Xue Lingyun's face was still red. She had lost all her dignity as the ancestor of Canaan dynasty. Did she still have any privacy? She sat down in a very serious manner and began to meditate. A day later, in the afternoon, Xue Lingyun's complexion was much better. However, she didn't walk around. When she opened her eyes, she saw Jiang Xiu sitting opposite her and looking at the grass outside. Wah wah! The sky outside suddenly darkened. There were also the cries of birds. Xue Lingyun and Jiang Xiu's expressions changed at the same time. What's going on? Jiang Xiu had a very bad feeling in his heart. He immediately rushed outside and used the cover to look at the sky. Above the sky, there was a figure emitting thick black smoke. His aura was extremely shocking. It was Di Chongqing. Xue Lingyun, stop hiding. Come out. Xue Lingyun's expression changed. We've been discovered. Xue Lingyun's injuries were far from recovering. At this moment, she had no chance against Di Chongqing. However, the other party had already killed his way to their door. How did we get discovered? Jiang Xiu didn't understand. He had been paying attention to the situation outside. During these 2 days, there weren't any demonic beasts around. How did such a large group of demonic beasts suddenly gather? Moreover, Di Chongqing came personally. He should have confirmed their location. Where did we go wrong? There was no time to think about it. The black shadow in the sky was already covering the sky and covering the earth. The black sword light slashed towards the waterfall. Chapter 486. The shattered sword slashed through the air, slicing apart the waterfall that was as huge as the sky. Sword chi surged out, flooding the area. Rushing towards the cave Jiang Xiu and Xue Lingyun were in. Even the surrounding cliffs were sliced apart by the sword chi. Humph! Xue Lingyun's slender palm curled up, as though she was carrying a weight of over 10,000 jin. Her aura enveloped the space in front of her as she instructed. Little fellow, come behind this lord. the dignified headmaster of the Tianqing school, Jiang Luoxia, had actually fallen to the point where he had to protect himself even in the face of sword light. His expression was extremely cold as a cold light flickered in his eyes. When he saw the sword light being curled up by Xue Lingyun, it was as though there was a strong suction force in her aura. All the sword light was sucked into her aura. With a violent tremble, the sword light shattered into nothingness. Before the shattered sword light particles dissipated, the sound of wind whistling could already be heard from the distant horizon. Black smoke surged over as Di Chongqing's figure rushed out from within. In his hand was the famed sword Black Watchtower that could shake the immortal martial world. On the sword rankings, the sword was famous, but the person was even more famous. It was unknown how the Black Watchtower ended up in Di Chongqing's hands. Everyone knew that the owner of the Black Watchtower was the master of the Bitter Realm, the Retrograde Leaf. Was the master of the Retrograde Leaf killed? That was an immortal king who was once famous on the genius rankings. Although he was from a different era, his cultivation speed was still recorded. Jiang Xiu's cultivation speed also surpassed him only after he broke through to the heavenly immortal realm. He was also a supreme existence that ruled over an area. Due to the difference in cultivation base and intelligence, Di Chongqing was far from being a match for the master of the Bitter Realm, the Retrograde Leaf. How did his sword end up in the hands of Di Chongqing? Xue Lingyun, you dare to have designs on the demonic core of this king? This is a capital offense. Hand over your life. As he spoke, he rushed towards Xue Lingyun with the black smoke. Boom. Xue Lingyun's palms met the attack, and in an instant, an extremely dazzling light erupted. The palms and the sword collided, and Jiang Xiu felt a gentle force pushing him back. Then he saw the strong light in front of him shoot straight into the sky, and a hole was blasted in the mountain above him. In the blink of an eye, they were thousands of meters high in the sky. Amidst the misty clouds, the two beams of light kept colliding and bouncing off each other. From afar, it wasn't apparent, but up close, one would be able to sense that the sky was trembling violently, and the airflow was being twisted and distorted. Immortals did not comprehend nomological laws. They pursued the great Tao of Jindan, which was more natural and mediocre. They were more well-rounded than gods, but they could also be said to be mediocre. However, anything that was not mediocre would definitely be an extremely powerful killing move. The mysteries of the gold core were endless and limitless. Immortals and gods were extremely astonished. Previously, Jiang Xiu was an immortal, hence he had a very deep understanding of immortals. The source of all his immortal arts was the great golden core art in the Jade Butterfly of Fate. That art contained all the mysteries of the gold core. Naturally, as time passed, there would be some geniuses who would create some immortal arts. But at the same time, there would also be large amounts of immortal arts that would be lost. Also, the golden age of the immortal martial continent had long passed. Before that, there were countless wars between the righteous and evil. Although it wasn't as exaggerated as crawling out from the immortal tomb, many immortal arts were lost. Things always developed in a spiral, and when they reached a low point, they would rebound. There were people who said that the immortal martial continent was currently climbing up from the bottom. The basis of these words was that in the past several thousand years, the immortal martial continent had produced countless geniuses. And he, Jiang Luoxia, was definitely one of the most dazzling geniuses. It was just that his glory was gone with the great destiny art. The battle above was extremely intense, but just like what Jiang Xiu predicted, Xue Lingyun didn't have any advantage against Di Chongqing. Let alone the fact that Xue Lingyun's injuries had yet to fully recover. Jiang Xiu faintly felt that he had seen this scene before. Such a situation also happened back in his house in Rivertown. This was the premonition of the appearance of the little destiny art. At that time, he saw Cheng Lingsu arriving at his house. And now, he saw Xue Lingyun being killed by Di Chongqing in the air. That sword strike that killed Xue Lingyun was extremely familiar to Jiang Xiu. In the next instant, he recalled where that powerful sword art originated from. It was the heaven-crossing sorrowful leaf of the Bitter Realm Retrograde Leaf. After Jiang Xiu broke through to the Immortal King Realm, he met the Bitter Realm Retrograde Leaf at the place of an old friend, and the two of them fought before. At that time, the Bitter Realm Retrograde Leaf used this sword art. At that time, the reason why he wanted to challenge Jiang Xiu was because there was a flaw in this sword art. In addition, he felt that there was a flaw in this sword art. No matter how powerful a sword art was, if there was a flaw, it would definitely be fatal. He wanted Jiang Xiu to find the flaw and perfect it. And in the end, Jiang Xiu didn't disappoint him. The Bitter Realm retrograde leaf sword art was broken by Di Chongqing's sword art. He was defeated. This Di Chongqing definitely had some connection with the Bitter Realm retrograde leaf. He actually knew the unique sword art of the Bitter Realm retrograde leaf, the heaven-crossing sorrowful leaf. Immortal's wrath tsunami. Xue Lingyun roared in anger. The space behind her surged violently as a violent force gushed out. Under the guidance of her palm force, rumbling sounds could be heard as the pressure from the heavens pressed down. Jiang Xiu didn't look, because he could already see the result. No matter what the process was, Xue Lingyun would still be killed by Di Chongqing in the end. She would die under his sword. In Jiang Xiu's mind, he could see Di Chongqing's tyrannical laughter towards the sky. No one can avoid my heaven-crossing sorrowful leaf. The power of the heaven-crossing sorrowful leaf was indeed great. When Jiang Xiu faced the sword art, he was also shocked. But unfortunately there was a flaw, and this flaw. MHM? Jiang Xiu seemed to have suddenly grasped something. His heart trembled. The flaw of this sword art hadn't been fixed. Jiang Xiu remembered that this was already a matter of several hundred years ago. In the end, the Bitter Realm retrograde leaf still wasn't perfected. However, it wasn't so difficult to break this sword art. And at this moment, Di Chongqing roared in the air. Xue Lingyun, accept your death. Heaven-crossing sorrowful leaf. His silhouette appeared in the air. Countless silhouettes soared through the air together with his sword. Each sword strike would kill a person. Amidst the myriad of falling leaves, a terrifying sense of sadness could be felt. At this moment, the power of all the sword art stacked together like falling leaves. At this moment, the sword light seemed to have surpassed the limits of speed. It was so fast that it seemed slow, jumping through the bindings of time and space. Under this sword art, Xue Lingyun's entire body was slowed down by several hundred times. There were obvious distortions in space. The terrifying thing about this sword art was that its power completely surpassed the limits of space. In fact, it even broke free from the control of time. But the problem was that if the power was too great, there was no way to control it. Jiang Xiu roared, 5 ghost steps soon. Xue Lingyun didn't even have time to hesitate. Jiang Xiu also didn't know if she would listen to him or not. If she listened, she would live. If she didn't, she would die. But in the face of such a powerful sword art, Xue Lingyun understood that she might have to submit. But at this moment, she suddenly heard Jiang Xiu's roar. Her sharp sixth sense as an expert made the correct choice. She followed Jiang Xiu's instructions and stepped out. She only saw the sword brushing past her. It didn't pierce her. In the range of a few hundred meters, she was in the middle of it, yet she wasn't hit. Xue Lingyun was dumbfounded. She simply didn't dare to believe it. However, she immediately understood that she would never have such an opportunity again. Her left palm, which she had been preparing for a long time, blasted out towards Di Chongqing's junior. Di Chongqing was so shocked that his eyes almost popped out of their sockets. He couldn't help but glance at Jiang Xiu below. A mere earth god, an ant-like existence, was actually able to see through the flaws of his sword art? Boom. Xue Lingyun's weak point opened up as a violent force gushed forth, slamming heavily into his back. The force penetrated his body, causing a gigantic palm imprint to appear on his chest. One couldn't help but say that Xue Lingyun's palm arts were truly tyrannical to the extreme. The palm imprint continued to expand, and along with this force, Di Chongqing's body exploded like a bomb. This was the body of a demon god at the grand heavenly immortal realm. Yet, it was actually blasted into a pile of mush by a single palm strike. Blood and flesh splattered as a resplendent demon core fell out. Xue Lingyun had a look of wild joy on her face. She grabbed the demon core and excitedly exclaimed, I got it! With this demon core, she would have a very high chance of breaking through to the grand heavenly immortal realm and becoming an immortal king. She then turned her gaze towards Jiang Xiu, who was below. He actually saw through the flaws of Di Chongqing's sword art. Chapter 487. Xuelingyun was truly shocked. A mere earth god was actually able to see through such a heaven-defying sword technique. This talent was truly breathtaking. If it wasn't for Jiang Xiu's shocking talent that allowed him to see through the flaws in Di Chongqing's sword technique, the one to die would probably be her, Xuelingyun. This little guy, that black ravager, also fell from the sky. Xuelingyun's clothes fluttered as she chased after it, grabbing it in her hands. This was a famed sword that was famous throughout the immortal martial world. It contained the complete law of darkness. Run. Seeing their king killed, the demonic beasts below were so frightened that they fled for their lives. For a moment, the birds in the sky screeched and flapped their wings, scattering in all directions. Xuelingyun grabbed the sword and muttered to herself for a moment before saying to Jiang Xiu, "For you." Although Jiang Xiu's cultivation was like an ant in her eyes, Jiang Xiu had played a crucial role in this battle. She had already taken the beast's core. This sword, no matter what, she couldn't take it away. Jiang Xiu didn't rashly take it. Black Ravager let out a strong sword hum that sounded like a mournful wail. With a kacha sound, it stabbed into the ground. "Little guy, why didn't you take it?" Jiang Xiu didn't answer her. Instead, he looked at Black Ravager in front of him and slowly reached out his hand. As if he was caressing his most beloved woman, he lightly caressed Black Ravager's body. His eyes were moist. Time seemed to have returned to that small building where he fought with the Bitter Realm retrograde leaf. That was a battle of immortal king level. Both of them were arrogant and insufferably arrogant. But now Jiang Luoxia had nothing. As for the Bitter Realm retrograde leaf, what's wrong? Xuelingyun had already arrived beside him. "You don't want this sword?" "This sword doesn't belong to me." Xuelingyun was very astonished. Such a famed sword, even if he didn't dare to say that he could fight against great heaven immortals, he could still fight against ordinary heaven immortals. This would make a small earth god like him 100 times more valuable. Even if he didn't dare to show it, he could still use it as a trump card. If it was someone else, they would have already gone crazy with joy. "It's currently an ownerless item. If I say it's yours, then it's yours." Jiang Xiu still shook his head. "No, it has a master and shouldn't be far from here. If I'm not wrong, the bitter retrograde leaf should be imprisoned nearby by Di Chongqing." When he fought with the retrograde leaf admitted that this was his natal sword. If the retrograde leaf died, he would never leave behind this famous sword of the immortal martial arts, let alone his enemies. Therefore, Jiang Xiu concluded that the bitter retrograde leaf was still alive. "Are you sure?" Jiang Xiu said. "If this is the life sword of the bitter retrograde leaf, then he should still be alive." He had only met the bitter retrograde leaf once, but at this moment, his heart was filled with the sorrow of a person who had fallen into the same predicament. "Give it a try?" Xuelingyun's expression was strange. She increasingly felt that Jiang Xiu was different from the rest. Even she coveted this sword, and it made Jiang Xiu's heart ache. Jiang Xiu actually wanted to return the sword to its owner. Such a huge treasure was at his doorstep, and he actually wanted to give it away? He really was a strange person. "I said that this sword belongs to you. You decide for yourself." Jiang Xiu nodded and reached out to pull out Black Fault. He took out a talisman and muttered to himself as he placed the talisman on the tip of the sword. With a wave of his hand, with a so sound, Black Fault was thrown out. His entire body flew into the air as he said, "Let's go." Xuelingyun followed closely behind. The flying sword in front of them formed a parabola as it flew towards the valley at an extremely fast speed. Jiang Xiu's entire body suddenly sped up. In the end, it was definitely Xuelingyun who arrived at a cave that was filled with demonic qi before her. Inside, there was a huge array that was suppressing a weak man with disheveled hair and shackles all over his body. The Black Ravager rushed in directly, and there were explosive sounds as sword qi was unleashed. "He's really still alive?" Xuelingyun's heart felt strange. This also meant that Black Fault was about to be returned to its owner. "Di Chongqing, you traitorous disciple. This lord will kill you." "Kill you." That man struggled with all his might. However, he seemed to be heavily injured, and was being suppressed by the array and shackles. This caused him to howl in pain. It was unknown whether it was from pain or anger. Jiang Xiu couldn't see his appearance clearly, but he felt that it was the bitter retrograde leaf. An immortal king of a generation was actually reduced to a prisoner. We are not Di Chongqing. Di Chongqing has already been killed by us. Jiang Xiu was really surprised. So it turned out that Di Chongqing was the retrograde leaf's disciple. This matter actually didn't spread in the Immortal Martial Academy. This meant that the context of this matter was clear. The bitter retrograde leaf's entire body trembled. He abruptly raised his head and saw a man and a woman. As expected, they weren't Di Chongqing. That bastard has already been killed by you guys? Jiang Xiu nodded. The retrograde leaf's somewhat cloudy eyes looked at Jiang Xiu. Suddenly, a trace of surprise flashed through his eyes. Jiang, no, you are a god cultivator and so weak. It can't be him. Who are you? Jiang Xiu's current appearance was still different from when he was an immortal king in his previous life. However, his silhouette was similar, especially his mannerisms. This couldn't be changed. The bitter retrograde leaf recognized him at a glance. However, Jiang Luoxia was an immortal king, while the Jiang Xiu in front of him was only a minor earth god. They were completely different existences. The retrograde leaf immediately rejected this possibility. Jiang Xiu. The retrograde leaf looked at Jiang Xiu. The more he looked, the more he felt that he resembled Jiang Luoxia. Coincidentally, he also had the surname Jiang. He asked in confusion, "Why didn't you take Black Ravager and leave?" Jiang Xiu said, "An immortal king of a generation shouldn't have fallen to such a state." These words were said for the retrograde leaf, but also for Jiang Xiu himself. "That's why I have to save you." Boom. Jiang Xiu / Gugu, destroying all the decorations in the array. The retrograde leaf knelt on the ground in exhaustion, and Black Ravager landed in front of him. "You're free." The retrograde leaf grasped the sword excitedly. Boom. The power in his entire body was awakened, and a violent energy burst out. At the same time, his entire aura suddenly rose, and the energy around him surged. "My retrograde leaf has finally seen the light of day again." Ha ha ha. He was so excited that he started laughing crazily. "Your name is Jiang Xiu. I will remember this kindness. In the future, if you have any requests for me, you can come to the Bitter Realm to find me." Jiang Xiu smiled faintly. He saved the retrograde leaf completely out of gratitude. He didn't expect him to repay him at all. Moreover, if Jiang Xiu really asked him for help, a mere immortal king, and one that was so heavily injured, wouldn't be able to help him at all. "You're exaggerating." The group left the cave. The retrograde leaf had to return to the Bitter Realm to recuperate. This was his top priority right now. After he left, Jiang Xiu and Xuelingyun were left behind. Xuelingyun still couldn't figure it out. "Little guy, a favor from an immortal king is far less practical than a Black Ravager sword. That's a real treasure. There's a complete law of darkness in it, and it's just right for divine cultivation. It's enough for you to enter the Sky God realm. I really can't figure it out. If you really need an immortal king's help, I can help you a little when I succeed." She was full of confidence now that she had the demon core in her hands. Jiang Xiu smiled. "Let's part ways here. You're leaving?" Xuelingyun cried out softly. She was very shocked. "What else? Didn't you have nowhere else to go?" Xuelingyun said. "Tianqing School has changed dynasties. Didn't you say you can't go back? Why don't you come to my Jialan dynasty? You saved me before. I can guarantee you a lifetime of glory." Jiang Xiu really didn't have anywhere to go. Although he had a lot of friends, his identity couldn't be exposed in the current situation. It seemed that staying in the Jialan dynasty and changing his identity wasn't a bad choice. Xuelingyun said, "It's decided then." "Don't tell me you won't give me face?" Jiang Xiu said. "However, I'm still a disciple of Tianqing School. If I leave rashly and Tianqing School finds out, I'm afraid it'll be a huge problem for you." Xuelingyun smiled easily and said, "Isn't that simple? Creating a new identity in the Jialan dynasty is a simple matter for me. You don't have to worry about that. You'll definitely be a noble disciple. Whether you want to be a young talent or a hedonistic disciple, having a bunch of wives and concubines won't be a problem. Now, do you still have any concerns?" Jiang Xiu shook his head. What he needed now was a safe identity that wouldn't draw suspicion from others, so that he could grow up again. With the great god sealing technique in his hands, it wouldn't be an extravagant hope for him to rule the Celestial Motion sect in the future. I'll do as you say. Okay, then let's set off for the spiritual state. Chapter 488. The spirit state had a vast territory with many sects and dynasties. The Jialan dynasty was one of the 3 independent dynasties in the spirit state. It had great national power, and its royal family was surnamed Xue. The current emperor was named Xue Xingjing. Xue Lingyun lived on the ethereal peak in the Jialan dynasty. This was the holy land in the hearts of the entire Jialan royal family, a truly supreme existence. After Xue Lingyun obtained the demonic core of the great heaven immortal realm, she was going to sit there and watch as she attempted to break through to the immortal king realm. It was unknown how long this trial would take. Hence, before she entered seclusion, she made arrangements for Jiang Xiu. Is this the family? The carriage stopped in front of an official residence. It was the residence of Jiang Chonghai, a second-grade courtyard in the Jialan dynasty. The identity that Xue Lingyun arranged for Jiang Xiu was this official's son. As for his mother's identity, it was a mystery. It was definitely not ideal for Xue Lingyun to impersonate a person. Jiang Xiu also believed that it would attract attention if she was exposed. It would be better to create a completely new person that didn't exist. Is it young master? A person who looked like a butler was waiting at the door with a lantern in his hand. In front of him stood a middle-aged elegant man with a goatee. He looked very elegant. It was the first time Jiang Chonghai saw him, so he didn't know if it was him or not. Looking at the situation, it should be. Seeing Jiang Xiu dismount, he lowered his voice and said, "You're here?" Jiang Xiu nodded slightly. There was no mistake. Jiang Chonghai carefully sized him up. This was an extra person that he had created out of thin air, making him bear the bad reputation of being disloyal to his family. The emperor's decision made him confused. After asking for a long time, he could only follow the order. However, he secretly guessed that it was actually the emperor's son outside, and he was being made a scapegoat. Only an earth god? Jiang Chonghai was a bit surprised. The current royal family members were all sky gods. The difference between an earth god and a sky god was only one realm, but it was also a natural chasm that many people couldn't cross in their lifetime. Not only was the difference in strength huge, but the difference in status was also magnified hundreds or thousands of times. To an earth god, a sky god was an existence of a nobler race. The room is ready. Jiang Chonghai personally brought Jiang Xiu there, and even sent away his most trusted butler. The two of them entered the room. The room looked like a wooden courtyard during the spring and autumn period. There was an incense burner inside, and it smelled very pleasant. There were some scrolls on the table. My humble abode is simple and crude. Please don't dislike it. Jiang Chonghai was already treating him like a prince who couldn't see the light of day. Not bad. Jiang Xiu quite liked it. It was much better than the shabby house in Thousand Town. The house here was spacious, and there was a bamboo forest outside the house. If this was on Earth, it would be a high-end villa area. After all, the person in front of him was a rank 2 official of the Jialan dynasty. As long as young master is satisfied. Jiang Xiu also took the opportunity to size up the person before him. His expression was calm, and his gaze was reserved. Jiang Xiu couldn't see through his cultivation level. This meant that his cultivation level was higher than Jiang Xiu's. At the very least, he was a heavenly deity. The civil and military officials of the Jialan dynasty were all cultivators. Their strength wasn't any weaker than that of a large sect. Otherwise, such a large dynasty wouldn't have existed for tens of thousands of years. Young master came so suddenly. I'm afraid that the family's wife and children have neglected you. Please forgive them. It happened so suddenly that Jiang Xiu hadn't explained to his family. He also didn't know what their attitude would be. Therefore, it was better to give Jiang Xiu a heads up first so that he wouldn't complain to the emperor. Jiang Xiu said, "Some sins can be forgiven but some can't." Jiang Xiu's expression suddenly changed. He thought that Jiang Xiu was just a prince outside, and would be easier to talk to. He didn't expect Jiang Xiu to be so sharp. He gave him a heads up, causing him to be secretly afraid of his own contempt. This person wasn't someone he could offend. At this time, you make the arrangements. If there is any neglect, it will be a capital offense. Jiang Xiu was already unhappy that the dignified sect master of Tianqing School was forced to stay here. He made these ignorant fellows widen their eyes. He didn't shout or shout, but slowly, Jiang Xiu felt that his majesty was even more frightening than the emperor's. Little did he know that this person in front of him, if he said a word of nonsense in Tianqing School, all the students of Tianqing School and the emperor of the dynasty would have to take off their pants. How could he, a mere second-rank Jialan dynasty, treat him with disdain? Yes, the emperor ordered that any request of this person must be satisfied. If the other party's requests couldn't be fulfilled, they could directly go to him. Jiang Xiu felt that his previous judgment was wrong. This person in front of him might not be as simple as a prince. Ahem. Jiang Xiu coughed unnaturally. He calmed himself down and said, "Arrange a servant girl for the young master's room, 2 daily servant girls, and a guard to take care of the young master's daily affairs." Immortal cultivators ignored fate and looked down on the common people. They paid attention to their Tao heart. How could they be distracted by the trivial matters of daily life? In a sect, no matter how small the sect was, as long as a cultivator met certain conditions, they wouldn't bother with such matters. They would all find servants to take care of it. The palace will appoint the candidates. Jiang Xiu said. In addition, if the young master wants to take in a wife or concubine, the emperor will personally appoint. As for the cultivation resources, the emperor said that it will be the same as that of a prince. If the young master has any other requests, the young master can state them. We will do our best to satisfy them. Jiang Xiu sat down unceremoniously, and he didn't even squat. This was quite presumptuous. In front of the elders, one had to squat. Jiang Xiu felt the powerful aura of a superior person. He was even more certain that in his heart, Jiang Xiu only regarded him as a servant and not a second-rank official of the dynasty. Yes, Xue Lingyun treated him with sincerity. Her treatment was comparable to that of an emperor's prince. I'll write down the things I need for cultivation. You can take care of it for me. Yes. Unknowingly, Jiang Xiu had already treated Jiang Xiu like a subordinate. He respectfully squatted down beside Jiang Xiu and waited for him to write down the resources he needed. Divine cultivators were relatively rare in the spiritual state. Among the self-cultivators, only 1 in 10 was a divine cultivator. This probability made people feel that there were no divine cultivators. Jiang Xiu was confused by the information he wrote down. He asked, "Young master, are you going to make elixirs?" Jiang Xiu nodded. This was completely different from ordinary elixirs. In order to prevent his elixirs from being leaked, he had mixed up the content and quantity of the information he wrote down. Get it done as soon as possible. Jiang Xiu was now in the subverted state of a higher earth god. He had the conditions to break through and become a heavenly god. The great god sealing art in his hands was enough to support him in taking this step to seize the fortune of heaven and earth. Yes. Jiang Chonghai took the information Jiang Xiu wrote down and was about to leave. However, after hesitating for a while, he paused and took a piece of paper. On it was information related to the Jiang mansion, including a description of his wife, concubines, and children. Although he had a great master like Jiang Xiu, he didn't want his family to be in chaos. The news that one of Jiang Chonghai's sons had returned from outside spread like a hurricane in the imperial capital of the Jialan dynasty. It became the hottest topic in the imperial court and among the playboys. Moreover, Jiang Chonghai cared for this son of his and was deeply fond of him. The cultivation resources he prepared for him were comparable to that of a prince or even more. This really caused an uproar. Even if a second-rank official's family had assets, there was still a limit. Using the standard of a prince to provide for an illegitimate son from outside, the few people in the family would definitely explode. A light drizzle fell from the sky. The rainwater on the eaves of the courtyard formed beads and dripped down. The bamboo forest swayed gently. A middle-aged guard, a slightly older woman who looked to be around 18 or 19 years old, and two young girls who were around 15 or 16 years old, came here with trunks of various sizes. They were sent by the palace and were talents chosen from thousands. "Greetings, young master," Jiang Xiu said. "Forget it. I'll have to trouble you to take care of me in the future." "We don't dare." The older palace maid stole a glance at Jiang Xiu. Her fate from now on would be tied to this man. Although she was somewhat unwilling, she had no choice but to bow her head in the face of fate. The guard was like a mute, not saying a word. A sword hung at his waist. If someone comes looking for trouble, there's no need to be polite. Beat those who deserve to be beaten. Kill those who deserve to be killed, no matter who it is. Jiang Xiu's tone was calm, but the dominance in his words could be felt through the chill of the rain. The guard bowed deeply. Xuelingyun's friend had been specially instructed. Even the emperor of Jialan dynasty didn't dare to slight him. The people he sent were naturally capable of taking on important responsibilities. At this moment, a chaotic voice came from outside. "Who does he think he is? An illegitimate son? What right does he have?" Chapter 489. While they were talking, a young man in luxurious clothes barged in with a few lackeys. Jiang Xiu's eyes swept over them, and the information about the Jiang family that Jiang Chonghai had given him flashed through his mind. His third son, Jiang Haoshuan, was different from his two elder brothers who were proactive and enterprising. He was a hedonistic son. He was quite good-looking, but there was anger in his eyes, as if he was very unhappy. While Jiang Xiu was sizing him up, he was also sizing up Jiang Xiu. Jiang Xiu's bearing was a coldness that came from his bones. He had once reached such heights that even the emperor of the Jialan dynasty was only a small fry in front of him. Jiang Haoshuan was slightly surprised. It was a huge contrast to the submissive image he had in mind. When an illegitimate son who had been wandering outside returned, he would definitely be shorter than others and feel uneasy. He didn't expect him to be like this, which made Jiang Haoshuan even angrier. "You are Jiang Xiu." Jiang Xiu ignored him and said to the three women from the palace, "In the future, this is your home. Do you still need me to tell you? Arrange it yourselves." The head maid bowed slightly. "Yes, young master." They had to take care of everything here. As the head maid, she had the final say in how to arrange everything. Some daughters of rich families would actually be sent to influential families to be maids in the name of learning the rules. When they reached marriageable age, they would be sent out of the manor and given a dowry. In fact, it was the wages of these years of working as maids. However, it was different for bedding maids. They had to stay here for the rest of their lives and become concubines in the future. When Jiang Haoshuan saw that Jiang Xiu directly ignored him, the anger in his heart grew even stronger. He almost couldn't control himself and went berserk. However, when he glanced around and saw the head maid, he couldn't help but be stunned. The girl's skin was snow white, her beautiful eyes were like a painting, and her figure was even more graceful. There wasn't a spot that wasn't perfect, and there wasn't a spot that wasn't eye-catching. It was so smooth that one couldn't look away. Father gave such a beautiful girl to this brat to be his bedding maid? Jiang Haoshuan's hair stood on end. "Jiang Xiu, are you deaf? Didn't you hear what I said to you?" Jiang Xiu looked at the guard and said, "Beat him out of here. If he dares to say another word, kill him." The maidservants and the others trembled when they heard this, but the guards did not hesitate to draw their swords. The cold light flashed, illuminating the world. The rain falling from the sky was like a cloth with a clear break. Jiang Xiu, on the other hand, was shocked. This guard was actually a lower-level immortal. It seemed like the emperor of Kalan Empire was indeed obedient to Xuelingyun. Ah! Jiang Haoshuan's eyes widened in horror as he saw countless sword gleams flashing by. He felt a chill run down his spine as the sword wind whistled through the air. The clothes on his body were sliced into over 100 pieces. Then he saw the other party charging over with a kick. Jiang Haoshuan's chest suffered a heavy blow and he was sent flying. "Bastard, you dare to hit!" Before he could finish his words, Jiang Haoshuan's eyes widened in shock. His face was filled with terror. This time, the guard's sword was directly aimed at his throat. Jiang Xiu had just said that he would kill him if he dared to say another word. At this moment, Jiang Haoshuan's soul almost flew out of his body. He wouldn't really kill him, right? However, the guard did not hesitate at all. His sword was fast and ruthless. Even if he was a lower-level immortal, in the Kalan Empire, he was definitely from a prestigious family. Perhaps in the eyes of the Emperor of Kalan Empire, this person was not an ordinary talent. Moreover, a guard's duty was to be loyal to his master. He would definitely carry out this order. No, Jiang Haoshuan screamed in horror. However, at this moment, a fallen leaf flew over. It seemed slow, drifting in the wind and rain. However, in a flash, it collided with the blade of the sword. Moreover, the force was so great that it actually knocked the sword away. An old man walked over from the pavilion. "Old man, do save me." Just as the old man was about to speak, he noticed that the door of the wooden house was slowly closing. He could only see Jiang Xiu standing behind the curtain of the house through the gap of the door. A strange expression appeared on his face. As an old official of the Jiang family for 3 generations, even Jiang Chonghai had to be respectful when meeting him. However, this illegitimate son was actually so arrogant that he dared to directly close the door when his elder came. "Old man, do." The old man frowned and muttered to himself as if he did not hear him. The 3 maids were all top class, especially the maid from the same room. He found her to be somewhat familiar. As for the guard, he was even more surprised. He was actually a lower-level immortal. Unexpectedly, the family head was so fond of his youngest son. "Sigh, third young master. Why did you provoke him? This person doesn't seem easy to get along with. I'm afraid that the Jiang family will be troublesome in the future." Jiang Xiu was a member of the Jiang family. As for getting along with the Jiang family, he had never thought about it. Now he was wholeheartedly focused on improving his strength as soon as possible. In his previous life, he was able to set foot on the throne of the Tianqing school from an unknown person. This time, he would definitely do the same. Moreover, he would do it faster and more resolutely. He turned around and walked into the house. With more than 3,000 years of cultivation experience, his realm could drop, but the things in his mind could not be lost. The alchemy skills that he had painstakingly cultivated in his previous life could not be lost either. In one afternoon, he produced 10 life elixirs. Soul-type elixirs were the most expensive among all elixirs of the same level. In fact, it was more than 10 times more expensive. Normally, it would be difficult to successfully refine even one elixir. However, he directly refined 10 elixirs in one afternoon. This skill was the result of the accumulation of unimaginable resources after he became the leader of the Tianqing school. Many alchemists did not achieve high achievements, not because they were not talented, but because they did not have the resources. Jiang Xiu might not be the most talented in this area, but he had endless resources. He could repeat this process over and over again indefinitely. That was why he had the ability to refine elixirs so quickly and easily. What? In the main hall of the Jiang family, an old lady stood up angrily. "Lawless! Lawless! The Jiang family is already merciful enough to let him go home. How dare he hit someone and beat up my grandson like this? It's more than that. If Elder Du hadn't heard my screams and rushed over, I'm afraid that I would have died under his sword." The old lady's eyes almost popped out when she heard this. She was so angry that her whole body trembled. Go and call him over. I want to see if he dares to be impudent in front of me." "Yes." The servant came quickly. It was a fat middle-aged man. He knocked on the door and arrogantly said to the head maid who opened the door with his hands behind his back, "The old lady has sent a message. She wants someone to go over immediately. Listen carefully, immediately." The head maid said, "The young master said that he will not see anyone." How arrogant. Could it be that he wants the old lady to come and see him? The head maid said, "I'm afraid that even if she comes, the young master won't see her." The middle-aged man's stomach felt flat. He had seen arrogant people before, but he had never seen such an arrogant person. He was so angry that he didn't come back to his senses for a long time. In this house, was there anyone who dared to not listen to the old lady? The door slowly closed once again. "How dare you? There will be a time when you cry." He was so angry that he kicked the door, but he could only go back and report. His eyes flashed with hesitation. This headmaid looked somewhat familiar. When he returned to the mansion and reported this to the old lady was so angry that she clutched her chest and almost fainted. Rebel, rebel. Is an illegitimate child trying to seize the family's power? The middle-aged man said, Old lady, that headmaid looks somewhat familiar to me. Old man Du, who was sitting on the chair to the left, also said, Me too. She looks like the only grandson of Shangguan Haohan, who was demoted to the southwest. Because of young Master Dugu and young Master Yi. Her name shook the capital. That talented girl, Shangguan Zhaorong. It's really her? Everyone's expression changed. At that time, this matter caused a great uproar in the capital. Because the Dugu and Bei families fought over a woman. The young masters of the two families fought and even engaged in a life-and-death struggle. In the end, the two families were not on good terms. In the end, the emperor stepped in and calmed things down. He even drove the two young masters out of the capital. One went to the border to serve in the army, the other went to a sect to become a disciple. And this talented girl went to the palace to learn the rules. That year, it seemed that Shangguan Zhaorong was only 16. Impossible, right? Jiang Haoxian was already stunned. Even the young masters of the two royal families fought over a woman. His father actually gave her to that illegitimate child as a bedwarmer. This was too generous, too biased. Grandmother, father is too biased. The old lady was also stunned. Since she is my Jiang family's maid, then who she is with should be up to me. How can I allow him to act recklessly? Chapter 490. Everyone present looked at the old madam. Outside, the family head had the final say, but inside the house, everything was decided by the old madam. You little brat, do you think I can't deal with you? The old madam's face turned cold. Her gaze turned to Elder Du and asked, How many experts are there in that courtyard? Elder Du said, There's only one expert, and he's quite strong. He's a lower immortal and a sword cultivator. Other than him, those three maids aren't worth mentioning. Fourth young master himself is an upper immortal. Spirit cultivator? The old madam was a bit surprised. Everyone present had the same expression. Their eyes couldn't help but reveal a look of contempt. In the eyes of immortal cultivators, immortals had the advantage, while spirit cultivators were thought to have no future. The average human had less than a 10% chance of becoming a spirit cultivator. Moreover, there was a big premise, which was that their talent for immortal cultivation wasn't good enough. Therefore, everyone present naturally looked down on Jiang Xiao. He's good for nothing and has such a bad temper. The old madam ordered. Elder Du, call that guard. Others, take down that unfilial son and beat him until he's submissive. Let him remember that outside he doesn't have a mother to teach him. Once he enters this house, he won't have a choice. Yes. In Jiang Xiao's courtyard, other than the guard, the other three maids had already been settled down. A group of people were busy in the kitchen. However, the three of them didn't seem too happy. The sudden change in fate made them not see hope, but darkness. They didn't expect that after being taught in the palace for so many days, they would be sent to such a family. Second-rank official. Although it wasn't good, it wasn't bad either. However, the problem was that Jiang Xiao was only an illegitimate child. In the Jialan dynasty, only the son of the first wife could inherit the family business. The other sons had to go out and work on their own. Although the family would help, it was limited. Therefore, only the son of the first wife could be guaranteed. Sister Zhaorong, young master's personality seems to be very cold and aloof. He's just an illegitimate child, yet he dares to treat his brother and his parents like this. Could it be? Shangguan Zhaorong's pretty face also revealed a look of worry. She was even more miserable than the two maidservants in front of her. She was already tied to Jiang Xiao's boat. It must be known that she originally had the opportunity to enter the Yi family, and even the Gudu family. If it wasn't for her grandfather's accident, she might have been the main wife, but she had fallen to this point. As soon as the incident happened, she immediately contacted her family and tried to mediate the relationship in the palace, but she was rejected. She was a very special existence in the palace because the first son of the Yi family and the first son of the Dugu family both liked her. Coupled with her background, everyone thought that she would definitely have a meteoric rise in the future. The huge difference was too much for a young girl to bear. As a result, her originally bright eyes had lost their luster and were incomparably dim. He's the master. He can do whatever he wants. We can only follow his orders. Shangguan Zhaorong was older than them and would be their leader in the future. Seeing her so depressed, the other two girls were even more depressed. Let's work. Young master's temper is not good. We can't do anything wrong. Yes. In the courtyard outside the kitchen, the guard stood in front of the bamboo forest. Beneath his feet were fine white stones. He held a long sword in his hand. Suddenly, the long sword slashed left and right. It was very sharp. The sword he used was like a knife, only venting brute force. How was this practicing the sword? It was more like venting one's emotions. It was very easy to injure oneself like this. It wasn't just the three maidservants who were depressed. He was also depressed. His calmness and experience covered up the emotions in his heart, but he still had to find a way to vent. The sword was very fierce, like a tiger creating wind. It was incomparably sharp. In the wind and rain, the beautiful bamboo leaves were cut in half. He originally had ambitions and wanted to make a career for himself. He didn't expect that once the emperor opened his mouth, he would be sent to the Jiang family to be the personal bodyguard of an illegitimate child. All his future prospects were like bubbles. He even had the thought of leaving. A dignified lower celestial immortal is actually going to be a hedonistic child's bodyguard. The depression in his chest was released along with the sword move. The strong sword ray rushed out and cut into the bamboo forest. A large area of the bamboo forest fell, but he didn't care at all. He had to worry about the scenery being destroyed, but who would care about his feelings? But at this moment his expression changed. Dense footsteps came from outside. From the sound of the footsteps, he could tell that there were quite a few people. Moreover, they were coming for this courtyard. Just now, he was already worried that things would get out of hand. Now he was right. An illegitimate child had just returned home and dared to be so arrogant. Wasn't this lacking in education? Moreover, after this education, that arrogant young master would have a new understanding of the world he would have to face in the future. But unfortunately, as a servant, he had to sacrifice his life. However, he and that young master were two grasshoppers on the same rope. If today's matter wasn't dealt with properly, that young master wouldn't have a good day, but he would be even worse off. Therefore, this trouble was also his trouble. Open the door, open the door. Outside, someone was banging on the door and shouting loudly. Just by listening to the knocking, one could tell that the other party didn't come with good intentions. They're here. The guard went to open the door. Just like how he closed it, he opened it now. But when the door opened, he was shocked. The old lady of the Jiang family actually came personally. He could be impudent to anyone, but in front of this old lady, he didn't dare. He bowed and said, "Greetings, old lady." "Where's Old Fourth?" "Still not coming out." The old lady's face was cold. The person beside her had already spoken. The guard glanced over and saw that the old man with the surname Du was standing beside the old lady. He had already experienced the power of this old man. Just a single leaf was enough to send his sword flying. With this level of cultivation, he knew that he had no chance of winning. This old man's cultivation level was probably one level higher than his own. Young master said that he won't see anyone." The old lady laughed out loud. "Who gave you the guts to do this?" Old man Du opened his mouth and said, "Early stage lower immortal. What do you think your chances of winning are against a middle immortal like me? Go in and pass on the message for the fourth young master to come out." Once one reached the immortal level, it was extremely difficult to take another step forward. Moreover, the difference between lower immortal level was huge. Therefore, after reaching the immortal level, it was divided into early, middle, and late peak stages. It could be said that the guard and old man Du were three small realms apart. If old man Du made a move, he wouldn't have the ability to stop him. Young master said that he won't see anyone. After muttering to himself for a moment, The guard still lowered his head and forced himself to say these words. The pores on his cheeks opened up. He knew what would happen if he said these words. How dare you? The old lady angrily slammed her walking stick on the ground, causing small stones to splatter everywhere. In this house, no servant dared to speak to her like this. When the voice came, the expressions of the three girls in the kitchen changed. They hurriedly ran out, only to see that the door was filled with people. Even old lady Jiang had come. Sister Xiaorong. The round-faced maid was so scared that her face turned pale. What do we do? They all knew that the situation was serious. The young master might be out of luck. If the young master was unlucky, they would be even more unlucky than the young master. Old Man Du made his move. His figure suddenly flashed, leaving behind an afterimage as he directly pushed forward. Ha! The guard angrily shouted, and the long sword in his hand slashed out. He guessed that Old Man Du was going to make a move. Facing an expert of this level, if he didn't make the first move, then he really wouldn't have any chance. In fact, he really didn't have any chance. Boom. The guard didn't see what was going on at all. The long sword in his hand flew out, and Old Man Du's palm was already sweeping over. Inside the room, Jiang Xiu had been facing the stove all day and felt a little dizzy. At this time, he liked to drink a cup of tea. He softly said, 3 steps on the cloud ladder, look back at the moon. Jiang Xiu's voice seemed to have magic, and the guard really did as he was told. At this time, he had already lost his mind. When someone gave him instructions, he would instinctively do as he was told. Shui Lingyun was like this, let alone him. He immediately leaped up and actually dodged that palm. The sword in the sky just happened to fall into his hand, and when he looked back, the sword's light came out. Chapter 491. Old Man Du was shocked. His attack was actually dodged. Not only that, but he was also able to launch a counterattack. And all of this was not done by the celestial immortal in front of him, but by the trash in the house. Although he was shocked, he did not take it seriously and only dodged a little. In front of absolute power, any technique would pale in comparison. This level of sword light was no pressure to him. Humph! With a cold snort, he swung his loose sleeves, and a gray cloud of qi surged out, causing the air to sizzle. There were also strands of lightning swimming in it, faintly forming an irregular cloud shape outside. Qi. The electric current on the cloud of qi seemed to have a magnetic attraction force. There was an obvious deviation in the sword light, and even the guard's entire body was tilted. The guard's eyes were filled with fear. This force was far stronger than he had expected, and it could actually make him lose control of his body. He suddenly channeled energy in his hand, and the sword body showed obvious tremors. Waves of sword cries whistled, resounding through the world. Boom! The energy burst out, with the two of them as the center, and spread out in all directions, forming a powerful shock wave that swept across the surrounding area. The bamboos in the bamboo forest were pressed to the point of bending. Push the boat with the current, explore the dragon and chase the cloud. Jiang Xiu's voice once again came from the house. The guard was stunned for a moment. Instead of retreating, he was already attracted by the opponent's magnetic cloud. He could not break free, and his strength was not as good as the opponent. At this time, he thought that the best way was to abandon his sword to protect himself. Was he still going to attack? However, there was no time to hesitate. He could only listen to Jiang Xiu. Ha! With an angry shout, the sword aura gathered at one point. In a flash, the attracted sword body did not retract, but pierced into it very easily. It turned out that the magnetic field was floating on the surface. However, this magnetic force was generated between the cloud and the electric current. It did not need to be hard, and of course there would not be any magnetic force inside. The sword light instantly pierced through the cloud of qi and went through. Behind him was Old Man Du himself. Old Man Du's expression changed greatly. One of his ultimate techniques had actually been seen through by someone with a single glance. It was that trash again. He didn't have time to be shocked. The sword light had already arrived. The sharp sword light seemed to be able to pierce through the air. It was extremely condensed and sharp. It was almost like a ray of light. In a flash, it was going to pierce through him. Although the difference of one level was huge, it was not as big as the difference between races. He had no choice but to retreat. However, behind him was the old lady and a group of people. If he retreated, the people behind him might be injured. Moreover, being forced to retreat by someone whose level was lower than his, he would lose face. In this dilemma, he could only take it head-on. The sword beam struck his chest. Elder Du's white hair and beard suddenly fluttered as if they were being blown by a strong gust of wind. A strong light burst out from his chest. His immortal body condensed into a dazzling silvery white light. Bang bang bang. They saw the sword beam sticking out in front of his chest. When it was half an inch in, the sword beam broke inch by inch. The sword beam was actually forcefully broken by his body. This caused everyone present to exclaim in surprise at Old Man Du's cultivation. Even the imperial bodyguards widened their eyes in shock. However, Old Man Du was a little unhappy because he was injured. Although it was only a minor injury, to be injured by someone who was one realm lower than him, he felt that he couldn't keep his face straight. Changing the rain and listening to the wind, strong wind and sudden rain. The guards were still exclaiming in surprise. However, Jiang Xiu's voice came from inside the room once again. He was still reading the book in his hand. At the same time, he picked up the teacup and took a sip. Compared to Earth, the tea here was much better. The spirit qi here was naturally abundant. The water here was also much clearer and softer. He missed it very much. After a few sips, it refreshed his mind. The mental fatigue that he had exhausted from refining pills just now seemed to have been swept away. His whole person was full of energy. Hearing this, the guards didn't dare to be negligent. In fact, they were already too slow. They should have attacked as soon as possible. However, it wasn't too late now. At least the initiative was still in their hands. Immediately, he chanted an incantation. Those shattered sword beams turned into fine sword beams. With a flick of his right hand, he guided the countless fine sword beams. Then, when the incantation was completed, he pointed his sword finger forward. The sword beams rushed toward Elder Du like a school of fish at the bottom of the sea. It was really like a rain of ridicule. Although the power and lethality weren't as good as a complete sword beam, the attack area was large and more difficult to defend against. Seeing this scene, Elder Du could no longer remain calm. He had been seen through once again. If his barrier could protect his entire body, then he wouldn't have been pierced by the sword beams. He had condensed all the Fa Li in his body into a single point to block the sword beams. With such a large area of sword beams attacking him like a storm, how could he instinctively condense the same amount of defensive points and block them? This time he had no choice but to retreat. He couldn't care less about the people behind him. When he retreated, the powerful shockwave caused by his retreat directly pushed the people behind him back, causing them to cry out in alarm. Some people with lower cultivations directly fell to the ground. After increasing the distance between them, Elder Du landed on the ground. His two palms danced, gathering his strength and concentrating his mind. Then with a boom his palms shot out. A powerful force rushed out from within, forcibly blocking the sword beams that filled the sky. He was very confident that the power he had gathered was enough to completely destroy this sword beam. If he hadn't been forced into a passive position, and had been given a bit more time, he knew that if he had added a bit more Fa Li, then the other party wouldn't have been able to withstand it. The sword beams would have sent him flying, saving face. However, right now he could only break this move first. Autumn wind rain. The guard had already entered into a mode of completely obeying Jiang Xiu. He no longer had any doubts about Jiang Xiu's eyesight and judgment. All that was left was an overwhelming shock. To be able to see through the other party's flaws in such a short period of time, and even think of a way to deal with it. This kind of intelligence was truly shocking. If this were to be spread out, countless eyeballs would probably fall out of their sockets. A thought appeared in his mind. Just where did this young master come from? He was actually so mysterious. He swung his long sword towards the sky, using sword intent to guide himself. His hands controlled the sword beams, and like a fish meeting a reef, they separated to the left and right. At the same time he flew into the sky with the sword, and was also guided upwards. With one split into three, the other party's heavy attacks pierced through. Elder Du's face could no longer remain calm. The sword beams attacked from the left and right. The guard in the sky had already grasped his long sword again, controlling the top of his head. It was too late. Everything was too late. The long sword was pressed against his neck. He had been defeated. Elder Du's eyes almost popped out of their sockets at this moment. He didn't dare to believe that he had actually been defeated by someone who was one level lower than him. Behind him, a large number of people had fallen. At this moment, they still hadn't reacted. When they raised their heads, they saw that Elder Du had been stopped. They were all dumbfounded. Didn't Elder Du say that his cultivation level was higher than his? How could he have been defeated? If it was a life and death battle, Elder Du would have definitely fought to the death. With his cultivation level, he would definitely be able to defeat his opponent, but he would also be seriously injured. However, this wasn't a battlefield. As members of the Jiang family, there was no need for him to fight to the death. Shangguan Zhaorong and the other girls also widened their eyes in shock. Being born in this immortal martial world, how could they not understand that it was almost impossible to fight against someone with a higher cultivation level? To be able to win, it could really be said to be a miracle. And the one who had created this miracle was definitely not the guard. At most, he was just a puppet pulling strings. The real creator was the young master in the room. He didn't even open the doors or windows, yet he was able to clearly see the situation outside. The originally cold and aloof young master had become incomparably mysterious. It was as if he had seen a glimmer of light in his originally dark life. How could someone with such wisdom be an ordinary person? Even if he was an ordinary person now, he was still a pearl covered in dust. Sooner or later, there would be a day when he would be able to bloom with endless radiance. But it was a pity that his talent wasn't good enough, and he had embarked on the path of spiritual cultivation. This greatly limited his future achievements. Shangguan Zhaorong's eyes flashed with brilliance, but she still calmed down. It wasn't that he was a Protoss who cultivated spiritual cultivation, but he wasn't an immortal cultivator. It was all because his talent for immortal cultivation was too poor. In the immortal martial continent, there was a group of people with outstanding wisdom, who could be called the teachers of the world. But unfortunately, they themselves had no achievements in cultivation. This young master in front of her had such a feeling. That ordinary wooden house was now covered with a halo of wisdom and mystery. With a creaking sound, the door was slowly opened. Chapter 492. After the door opened, the mysterious young master stood at the entrance. His long hair casually scattered, his face as resolute as marble. His eyes were extremely cold, and his footsteps were steady. Step by step he walked over, exuding an imposing aura that made it hard for people to breathe. Although it was often said that one couldn't judge a book by its cover, one would be able to tell what a person was like with a single glance. When the people present saw Jiang Xiu, they all felt that this person was extraordinary, like a dragon trapped in shallow water. It was as if nothing here was worthy of him, as if he didn't belong here. But no matter how arrogant a person was, they couldn't compare to their life. His life belonged to the Jiang family, and he was also the illegitimate child of the Jiang family. If he wanted to fly, he needed to have the ability. Moreover, he was a divine cultivator. It was exactly as the saying went. One's heart was higher than the sky, but one's life was thinner than paper. The old lady's face was cold as she took a few steps forward. The middle-aged man who had knocked on the door earlier hurriedly followed after her, holding an oil paper umbrella, so that the old lady wouldn't be drenched by the rain. "You're Jiang Xiu." He didn't answer her. An old lady at her age was the most unreasonable person in the house. If you respected her, she would dare to take advantage of her seniority. If you flattered her, she would be even more unreasonable. Jiang Xiu said, "This place doesn't welcome outsiders, nor do we welcome visitors. Please leave. Remember, don't come here again. If there's a next time, I won't be so polite." He was only here in name, making an identity, so that he would have a documented experience when he appeared in the future. He didn't really want to integrate into the Jiang family's life. Jiang Xiu wouldn't fall to such a state. Right now what he needed to do was to raise his cultivation. In the immortal martial continent, Strength was everything. Once you had strength, fame and fortune would follow. Close the door. Wait. The old lady's eyes twitched, and she was so angry that she almost went berserk. When you were outside in the past, I didn't care and I couldn't care. But this is the Jiang family, and your house is in the Jiang family. As long as you are a member of the Jiang family, I can manage your house, Jiang Xiu said. Don't make things difficult for yourself. I'll say this again, no one is welcome here. The red line at the door is the red line. Whoever dares to cross it will be killed. Including that old lady. The guard immediately replied, yes. How dare you? The people around the old lady all reached out to Jiang Xiu angrily. They were filled with righteous indignation and wanted to rush up to teach Jiang Xiu a lesson. However, Jiang Xiu was too strong, especially the guard who stood there. The sword in his hand was emitting a cold light. When the rain fell on it, it splashed, but the sword did not move at all. How dare you talk to the old lady like that? You're out of control. Jiang Haoshuan didn't expect that even his grandmother would be scolded. He originally wanted to regain his face, especially to snatch Xiaorong back. This was a woman that even the Yi family's young master and the Dugu family's young master liked. If she fell into his hands, he would be able to walk around the streets. Now his beautiful dream was about to turn into an illusion. Jiang Xiu, do you know who she is? Once you enter this house, she is your grandmother, Jiang Xiu said. If she wasn't an elder and dared to cause trouble like this, she would already be a dead person. You. Jiang Xiu's coldness made the Jiang family very unhappy. At the same time, they were also a bit afraid of this person. Every time he opened his mouth, he would kill. This kind of person was not easy to provoke. If they could avoid him, then they should avoid him. However, the old lady didn't believe that she couldn't control an illegitimate child. What, just because you have a bit of wisdom? You don't even put your elders in your eyes. Grandma Jiang was also a man. No matter what, she had to teach Jiang Xiu a lesson. You're just an insignificant god elementalist. You're as lowly as an ant. Although my Jiang family has a large business, we never raise trash. You can live here, but don't even think about getting a single pill for resources. If you don't hand them over, then don't blame this old lady for being impolite. Jiang Xiu refused to be disciplined. She felt that her dignity had been attacked and was very unhappy. However, she had no feelings for Jiang Xiu. The Jiang family didn't lack a courtyard like this. What she really couldn't stand was that Jiang Xiu occupied a large amount of cultivation resources. If he had more, there would naturally be fewer people, which would affect them. Moreover, the resources that Jiang Xiu needed were equivalent to the level of a prince. The Jiang family was equivalent to giving more than half of the resources to him alone. The eldest son would definitely not be able to accept it. Moreover, he was a piece of trash that couldn't be raised properly. On the surface, Jiang Xiu's resources were taken from the Jiang family. In fact, they were given by the Jiang family. Anyone who had done business before knew that this was just a move from the Jiang family. The Jiang family would only take advantage of this matter, and would never let themselves suffer a loss. However, Jiang Chonghai couldn't reveal the truth to anyone. A piece of trash that can't be raised properly? Jiang Xiu was patient. The time he would stay here might not be just a few days or a few months. It might be a few years or even more than a decade. Therefore, he still had to deal with this matter properly. Otherwise, this trouble would never be solved. Isn't that so? The group of people showed disdain on their faces. Jiang Haoshuan was the most useless person in the Jiang family. He was also a cultivator. His current realm was almost the same as Jiang Xiu's. However, in terms of the difference between immortals and gods, Jiang Haoshuan's aptitude was not bad. As long as he was enlightened one day and knew how to improve himself, he would be able to advance. However, the sad thing about a divine cultivator like Jiang Xiu was that even if he knew how to improve himself and tried his best, in the end, it would still be in vain. This was the difference between them. The difference between a piece of trash and a genius. Then according to your opinion, how should my resources be divided? Jiang Xiu asked. The old lady said, of course it should be divided among your 3 brothers. They will take the majority, and you will take the minority. Your eldest brother is at the early stage of lower heaven immortal, and your second brother is at the middle stage of lower heaven immortal. Although your third brother is not as good as the other two brothers, he also had wind and fire dual spiritual roots during the spiritual root test. Which one of them is not better than you? Our Jiang family is fair. The one who is stronger will be stronger. Jiang Xiu actually laughed for the first time. That's right. The one who is stronger will be stronger. Is it true that if I reach the middle stage of heaven immortal, you will never visit my door, let alone interfere with my resources? At present, Jiang Xiu was at the peak of earth immortal. The next step was the great natural chasm. To break away from earth immortal and become a divine immortal, this step was as difficult as climbing the sky. Countless people were stuck at this step, especially those with poor talent. Moreover, they still had to cross a small realm and reach the middle stage of lower heaven immortal. Yes, that's right, the old lady said. Then it's a promise. The old lady was a bit surprised. Where did this brat's confidence come from? Everyone knew that the human race's spiritual cultivation was all trash. Earth immortal was basically the limit. Those who could reach divine immortal would need a lot of time to accumulate before they could trigger a mutation. You agreed very quickly. However, don't tell me you're thinking of using a few decades, or even 100 years as the deadline. This old lady isn't that easy to fool. Jiang Xiu said. Of course not. The old lady said. Then 3 months it is. Hua. As soon as the old lady said this, everyone present was in an uproar. One had to know that these were all the old lady's subordinates. They all looked at each other in dismay. 3 months to cross a great natural chasm and advance another small realm. Not to mention that many people would never be able to cross it in their lifetime. Even the most elite of geniuses and heavenly immortals would need 3 years and 8 months to advance another step. And last time, Jiang Xiu used 12 years and 8 months to advance from the early stage of lower heaven immortal to the middle stage of middle stage. This was also why his name was listed in the genius rankings. 3 months to advance a large realm, and then a small realm. This was completely impossible. Everyone thought that Jiang Xiu would definitely refuse, but they did not expect that Jiang Xiu would actually agree. All right, then it's settled. In 3 months, if I reach the middle stage of lower heaven immortal, this place will become a restricted area for everyone in the Jiang family. You will not be allowed to take half a step in, and you will not have the qualifications to take even half a step. Young master. Jiang Xiu's subordinates all looked at Jiang Xiu with extreme shock. Wasn't this the same as handing over the resources? Then this is what you said yourself. Don't blame AI Jia for comparing with you. Jiang Xiu said. My words carry enormous weight. Close the door. After Jiang Xiu finished speaking, he did not waste any more words. He turned around and returned to his room. The guards also began to close the door. Grandmother, what about that servant girl? Jiang Haoxian said anxiously. 3 months. Wouldn't that Shangguan Zhaorong be ruined? Stinking brat, you don't do proper work all day. When you have strength, will you still be afraid of not having women? Chapter 493. Advancing by one major realm and one minor realm in 3 months was truly a fool's dream. No one would be able to do it like Jiang Xiu. Grandma Jiang coldly glanced at the tightly shut courtyard door. The Jiang family and the courtyard door could shut her out. This made Grandma Jiang's heart burn with anger. The more she looked at the closed courtyard door, the angrier she became. However, she forced herself to endure. Since she could not kill Jiang Xiu in one go, she would slowly boil the frog in clear water. 3 months. Give him 300 years, 3,000 years, or even 30,000 years. He can't do it. The personal butler beside Grandma Jiang was still indignant. As Grandma Jiang's closest servant, he was even angrier when Grandma Jiang was defeated than when he suffered a loss. This was the attitude that a top-notch lackey needed. Elder Du, what do you think? Grandma Jiang asked Elder Du beside her. Although Elder Du failed today, it did not affect Elder Du's position in Grandma Jiang's heart. Elder Du pondered for a moment. Fourth young master, this is incredible. This old man has lived for so long, but I have never seen an earth god who can see through a celestial immortal's flaw. At the same time, he was able to find a way to deal with it. Moreover, he was able to do it in an instant. Grandma Zhang's expression changed. Could it be that Elder Du thinks that he can reach middle stage lower celestial immortal in 3 months? The people beside them were also not calm. This old man Du had both strength and wisdom. Most importantly, he had never been wrong about anything he said. Ha ha. Old man Du began to laugh. His laughter was somewhat helpless, causing everyone present to be a bit confused. However, they heard him say, no matter how talented a person is, from the Sky Motion sect leader Jiang Luoxia, to the distant man Gu Qingyi, to the even more distant Shilai Wenwen, no matter how amazing their talents are, they still can't do it. Although the fourth young master is special, can he compare to those people? No, far from it. How can he do it? Everyone was relieved when they heard this. They were really scared to death. Haha. Old Du is right, you're right. The old lady's mood also improved. Thinking about those big shots, which one of them wasn't amazing? How could Jiang Xiu compare to them? The difference was like heaven and earth. Perhaps even if old man Du was beaten to death, he would never have imagined that the Jiang Xiu before him was the peerless genius who had caused a huge commotion in the immortal martial continent. The reason why Jiang Luoxia's reputation was so resounding and he was revered by countless geniuses of the immortal martial continent was not merely because he was the headmaster of the Tianqing school. More importantly, it was because he had become an immortal king at the speed of 21 years in 3,000 years. He was ranked as the 321st fastest person to become an immortal king on the immortal martial continent. No matter how you looked at it, this data didn't sound like much, but if you put it in another way, you would understand why it was so stunning. He was the fastest person to become a celestial king in this world. No one alive was as fast as him. Old lady, let's go back. A group of people had rushed over angrily. Although they didn't crush him to death, they still left in high spirits. That tightly shut courtyard door now looked a little sad. Old lady, are we just going to let them go like this? The old lady glanced at the number 1 lackey, and Fu, and smiled. What kind of evil idea do you have now? And Fu grinned. Living here, they don't need to eat, drink, or wear, right? Resources don't pass through my hands, but don't these living expenses have to pass through me? The old lady smiled and didn't finish speaking, which was equivalent to tacitly agreeing. In the courtyard, the 3 maids and the guard all felt a change in their feelings. They looked at the silent room and glanced at each other. This young master's calmness was beyond their imagination, as if nothing had happened just now. Don't just stand there, let's get to work, Shangguan Zhaorong said. Yes. The 2 maids responded and followed Shangguan Zhaorong to the kitchen, leaving the guard standing alone outside Jiang Xiu's courtyard door. He thought about many things. In 3 months, Jiang Xiu definitely wouldn't be able to become a lower celestial god, much less become a middle celestial god. He was an immortal cultivator, and all his resources were given to him by his master. If Jiang Xiu didn't have any cultivation resources, then he also didn't have any cultivation resources. Although Jiang Xiu gave off a shocking feeling, the reality of the situation was right in front of him. If Jiang Xiu didn't give him such a shocking performance, plus the fact that he would lose his cultivation resources in 3 months, he would leave Jiang Xiu without hesitation. But now he was in a dilemma. He was waiting for Jiang Xiu to open the door and give him an explanation, or to persuade him to stay. But he couldn't wait. He waited for a long time, but the door still didn't open. True masters were all courteous, and Jiang Xiu obviously wasn't this type of person. He boasted that he was a talent. Jiang Xiu didn't come out for a long time, and he felt more and more that he wasn't being valued. He was disheartened. He sat in front of the courtyard and looked up at the sky. The rain didn't stop, but the sky was slowly darkening. It was the first night since he came to the Jiang family. He wanted to say goodbye to the young master after dinner. He didn't want the future of the Jialan dynasty anymore. Shangguan Zhaorong and the others finished preparing dinner and placed it on the long table. Shangguan Zhaorong brought it over and gently knocked on the door. Young master, it's time for dinner. Jiang Xiu responded, come in. The door was opened, and Jiang Xiu was sitting in front of the table, writing something. Shangguan Zhaorong walked in carefully. The young master's temper wasn't very good, and he wasn't easy to get along with. I just came here today and am not familiar with many things, so I only made these. Young master, make do with it. Tomorrow, I will go to the internal affairs to get more ingredients. The imperial palace couldn't provide food as it was too far away, and many things needed to be fresh. And Jiang Xiu responded and began to eat. Today is your first day here, so I will give you a chance. Before the lantern lights out, you can walk out of this courtyard. I don't like to force people. If you want to stay, then stay. If you don't want to stay, then we will just meet by chance and pass by each other. Shangguan Zhaorong was stunned for a moment, and then muttered to herself. She had to consider this carefully. This wasn't a job or choosing a science or arts course. This decision would affect her life. Call the people outside in too. Yes. Jiang Xiu treated everyone equally and made it clear. If they wanted to stay, then they could stay. If they didn't want to stay, then they could leave. Jiang Xiu naturally wouldn't pursue them. Young master, I want to stay. The round-faced maidservant in the back spoke up. Although Jiang Xiu was not a good choice for her, she was only going to be a servant girl. When she turned 18 and reached the age of marriage, Jiang Xiu's dowry would be a little less and her connections would be a little shallow. I also want to. Another maidservant with a sharp chin also spoke up. The remaining hesitant ones were the guard and Shangguan Zhaorong. Jiang Xiu didn't pay any attention to them. Even when the two maidservants said they wanted to stay, Jiang Xiu didn't say anything. He only cared about eating and reading books, not caring about them at all. Speaking of this kind of attitude made the guard and Shangguan Zhaorong a little uncomfortable, but they were also surprised. Jiang Xiu had just arrived and offended the matriarch. He needed people's support the most and needed them very much. He should be able to persuade them. Did this kind of attitude mean he had something in his heart? The guard didn't speak. He could leave at any time. If he didn't leave today, he could leave tomorrow. If he didn't leave tomorrow, he could leave the day after. But Shangguan Zhaorong was a maidservant of a Tongfang. As long as she stayed here for a night, everything would be different if she left. Everyone's eyes fell on Shangguan Zhaorong. These maidservants and guards also knew that Shangguan Zhaorong's identity wasn't ordinary. Jiang Xiu giving her freedom was something she dreamed of. From now on, she was free. Yi family's young master, good of family's young master, she could choose. Shangguan Zhaorong bowed deeply to Jiang Xiu. Zhaorong has little fortune and has no fate to serve young master. Many thanks for young master's kindness. I thank you here. She had decided to leave. The other three people on the side lowered their heads and didn't speak. Then Zhaorong will leave, go. The expression on Jiang Xiu's face didn't change at all. Shangguan Zhaorong slowly got up and turned to leave. After leaving, she heard Jiang Xiu say from inside the room. What about you? It's not too late to leave now. The sky outside was already very dark, almost invisible. The other courtyards of the Jiang family were all lit up. Shangguan Zhaorong didn't think that the first day she came to the Jiang family would also be her last day. She looked back at the young master in the room and turned to leave. Chapter 494. Jiang Xiu's mood did not change at all because of Shangguan Zhaorong's departure. A person with great ambitions would not care about such small gains and losses. After he finished eating dinner with the help of the maids, he ordered, "In the following days, I will be going into closed-door cultivation. If there is nothing important, do not disturb me." "Yes, young master." However, the two maids were a bit confused because their pillar of support had left. The guard did not say anything, his heart heavy. He really wanted to ask Jiang Xiu how confident he was in reaching mid-heavenly deity in 3 months, but this was not something a servant like him could ask. At this moment, a piece of white paper on Jiang Xiu's desk slowly appeared, as if someone was writing to him from afar. The words on it read, "Little fellow, this sovereign will be in closed-door cultivation for 30 years, or even several hundred years. Goodbye." Even if Xue Lingyun did not tell him, Jiang Xiu knew that under the temptation of becoming an immortal king, anyone would try to break through as soon as they came back. An immortal king and a heavenly immortal were two completely different existences. The difference between them could be compared to an emperor and a prince. Jiang Xiu did not say anything, reaching out and stuffing the paper back into the book. Someone wrote a letter to the young master? The guard had a feeling that there was someone behind Jiang Xiu. If there was no one, then no matter how good his intelligence was, it would be dragged down by his innate talent. He would not have the same resources as a prince, nor would he have someone to serve as his guard in the Rain Dragon Guard. The guard Li Chong was a very loyal person. If it was anyone else, they would have left long ago like Shangguan Jiaorong. However, he was not a foolish person. He also had his own ideals and ambitions, and would not hang himself on the tree that was Jiang Xiu. Big Brother Li, what kind of person is the young master? As a servant, the round-faced maid did not shy away from asking the guard, hoping to get some hints. The guard shook his head. I don't know. Then Big Brother Li, will you leave? The guard was silent for a moment before saying, This concerns my future. I will have to wait for another month before deciding whether to stay or leave. This month's resources had already been given out by the palace before he left. He was paid to leave, so even if he wanted to leave, he would have to finish his job first. Oh. The two maidservants looked at each other and saw the worry in each other's eyes. If the guards left in a month, there would be only the two of them left. They would be lonely. They felt afraid when they were young and worried about their future. After Jiang Xiu closed the door, he began his closed-door cultivation. The first thing Jiang Xiu wanted to do when he returned home was to check on Jiang Xiu. However, the moment he stepped into the house, he heard from the housekeeper about what had happened in Jiang Xiu's courtyard. His expression changed immediately, and he hurriedly went to look for his mother. The two of them even quarreled. Jiang Xiu's background was mysterious, and the emperor valued him so much. How could Jiang Chonghai dare to offend him? Instead, it was his mother who offended him. He himself has already promised that if he doesn't reach the mid-lower heavenly deity stage in 3 months, the resources will be handled according to our Jiang family's rules. The old lady was also adamant. She would never allow her son to be so biased towards an illegitimate child from outside. This is what I owe him all these years. I just want to pay him back as soon as possible. Jiang Chonghai couldn't reveal this to his mother, and could only find this excuse. You owe him, the old lady said with a cold face. If he can enter this house, then we don't owe him anything. You don't need to say anything more. I have already decided on this matter. Mother, leave. The old lady was very firm. Jiang Chonghai couldn't argue with her, and had no choice but to leave. Afterwards, he went to see Jiang Xiu and was also rejected. This made Lord Jiang so angry that he almost vomited blood. The young master has ordered that he won't see anyone. Lord Jiang, please leave. Jiang Xiu's cultivation had already reached the peak of the earth deity stage. He only lacked the final step to transcend the heavens and seize the fortune of heaven and earth. This step was recorded in the Great God Sealing technique. In fact, a very important step was to strengthen one's soul. Many people couldn't take this step. One reason was because they didn't have the cultivation method. Another reason was that it was very difficult to strengthen one's soul. The Great God Sealing technique contained a myriad of methods for divine cultivation. The only thing it didn't contain was a secret technique to strengthen one's soul. In the immortal martial continent, there were very few secret techniques to strengthen one's soul. Even a large sect like the Tianqing school didn't have them. However, just because there was no cultivation method didn't mean there was no way. The method passed down by the Tianqing school was to cultivate pills. After taking a soul pill, he began to meditate and cultivate. First, he had to strengthen his soul. The nourishment of one's soul was a very slow process. This was one of the main reasons why cultivation was slow. Jiang Xiu closed his eyes and entered a meditative state. There was no heaven, no earth, no matter, no self. His soul floated, nourished by the medicinal effects and slowly strengthened. Jiang Xiu's soul had once been strengthened to a certain extent. Now that he was cultivating again, although he didn't have the cultivation method, he had gained some insights after 3,000 years of cultivation. His progress was quite fast, and the medicinal effects were absorbed well. 90%, close to 90%? Jiang Xiu's face, which had always been calm, was now filled with joy. The conversion rate of the medicinal effects was close to 90%, which was very surprising. In his previous life when he was cultivating, the conversion rate of the soul pill was 70%, and 70% was already shocking enough. Most people only had 10% or even less. 40% was already worthy of the title of genius, and 50% was already considered a super genius. Now that he had converted to a divine cultivator, he had a terrifying 90% conversion rate. This might have something to do with him changing to a divine cultivator. In addition, it might also have something to do with him changing to a saber cultivator. Everything was due to the combination of conditions. The conversion rate was indeed high, but it was far from enough if he wanted to advance to middle stage lower earth god in 3 months. Before he had even finished absorbing the first life pill, he had already swallowed the second pill. In his previous life, Jiang Xiu would never have dared to do such a thing, but with the experience of his previous life, he felt that he could control himself. After he took the second soul pill, the double medicinal effects were, of course, more intense. Then, problems came one after another. The conversion rate of the medicinal effects was decreasing, and it dropped back to 70% in an instant. Jiang Xiu was very satisfied with this result. The current rate of growth of his soul was twice as fast as the last time. He took the third pill. This time, the conversion rate of the medicinal effects dropped to 50%. If he was still the suzerain of Tianqing school, he wouldn't care at all. If he had sufficient resources, he would do anything for the sake of speed. But now he was living under someone else's roof. Even if the Jialan dynasty fully supported him, it was far inferior to the Tianqing school. He only had 7 pills left. He didn't take the 4th pill, as it was no longer worth it. Although 3 pills were a waste, it was the fastest. After more than 2 hours, Jiang Xiu was pleasantly surprised to find that not only was the conversion rate higher, but the absorption rate of the medicinal effects was also much faster than before. The absorption rate of 3 pills was even faster than when he took 1. In other words, the absorption rate of the medicinal effects had increased by 3 times, and it was close to 4 times. The conversion rate and absorption rate determined the speed of an alchemist's divine soul. Compared to the last time, the speed had increased by nearly 5 times. Jiang Xiu couldn't remember how long it had taken him to reach this stage last time. He remembered that the fastest time he had reached this stage was 3 years and 8 months. But he was still far from that. He might have taken more than twice as long, about 6 or 7 years. With the current speed, Jiang Xiu would need more than a year to reach mid-level lower celestial god. Although this would break the fastest record, it wouldn't be enough for him to win the 3-month agreement. Moreover, Jiang Xiu had an even more serious problem, which was the problem of resources. He only had 7 pills left. Before he could obtain other resources to refine pills, he couldn't guarantee that he could reach this top speed. On the second day, he still greedily swallowed 3 pills, but on the third day, he changed it to 2 pills. At noon on the 4th day, the sun shone brightly, falling on the flowers and plants in the courtyard, covering them with a golden luster. The flowers and plants emitted a fragrance, and the wind blew gently. 2 young girls had built a swing in the courtyard, and were sitting on it swaying. The guard sat in the corner, staring blankly at the sky. The door that had been closed for 4 days suddenly opened, and Jiang Xiu appeared at the door. "Young master." Jiang Xiu opened his mouth and ordered, "Send this letter to Jiang to my father. Tell him that I want to see what's written on it by tomorrow noon at the latest." His tone was as if he was asking for something from his father. He was simply a creditor. At the same time, outside the imperial capital, a group of armored warriors returned. The leader was the second young master of the Jiang family. Chapter 495. The job of delivering the letter should have been done by Shengguan Zhaorong. After all, it was a direct meeting with the family head. However, she had already left and the servant girl had no master, so the servant girl took over the job. "However, young master, in our house we can't even get food. Those people are also stopping us from going out to buy it." Jiang Xiu furrowed his brows. He hated these trivial matters. In the past, he had never needed to worry about them. But now, They were bothering him at a critical moment in his cultivation. He opened his mouth and said, "Tell this matter to Lord Jiang as well." The fat girl said, "Is this appropriate? This kind of thing was not for a servant girl like her to butt in." Jiang Xiu said, "If I say it's okay, then it's okay. Go quickly." The fat girl was smart. She first went to find Jiang Chonghai's personal housekeeper. Only then could she see Jiang Chonghai. After he took the letter from the girl and read it, his face revealed an extremely shocked expression. The housekeeper could not help but ask, "Family head, what is written here?" Jiang Chonghai frowned and handed the letter to the housekeeper. 100 stalks of 500-year-old soul-raising grass, 200 stalks of flowerless spiritual concealment, 3 gene of reincarnation heavenly flower shore, spirit-swallowing beast monster core. This, the steward was dumbfounded. A 500-year-old soul-nurturing grass was more valuable than a month's worth of cultivation resources for the steward. This was more than all the resources of all the princes added together. They even doubted that the emperor's cultivation resources for a month were that much. The fat girl added, "My family's young master said that he wants to see everything before noon tomorrow." What? The veins on the housekeeper's face were about to pop out. What a big tone. Was this a request? It was more like an order. Jiang Chonghai signaled for him to be quiet. He did not have the final say in this matter. The resources came from the palace. He wanted to enter the palace and see the emperor. Everything was decided by the emperor. I thought the 4th young master was planning something. He wants to be promoted to mid-lower heavenly deity in 3 months. It turns out he wants the family head to give these resources to him in advance. These things are enough for him to use for the next few hundred years. Ridiculous. Jiang Chonghai put away the letter and said, "What else did your family's young master say?" The fat lass said, "Also, they don't distribute food to our courtyard. Even if they do, it's nothing good. It's not worthy of young master's status." Jiang Chonghai frowned. "There's such a thing? I'll ask immediately," the housekeeper said lightly, apparently not taking it seriously. Jiang Xiu's face was cold. These resources were provided by the imperial palace, so he had no right and no ability to interfere. However, since Jiang Xiu was in his house, if he neglected him and the emperor blamed him, he could not afford to take the blame. "If there is a next time, you will be fired from your position." The butler was shocked. "Yes, I will definitely take care of it." The clan head was actually so angry because of such a small matter. He felt a chill run down his spine, and a chill went straight to his head. Ever since he became one of the stewards of the Jiang clan, the clan head had never said such harsh words. He was a little stunned. Why would the patriarch care so much about the 4th young master? Immediately prepare the carriage. This official wants to enter the palace to see the emperor. When Jiang Chonghai was riding the carriage into the palace, he kept thinking that Jiang Xiu's list was enough to cover a prince's expenses for hundreds of years. The emperor would never agree. This mysterious young master really didn't know how to conduct himself. The emperor had said that he could ask for anything. That was just a polite sentence, but he actually took it seriously and asked for such an exorbitant price. It was a bit ridiculous. Knowing that he had arrived, the emperor received him faster than ever. Xue Xingjing expected that Jiang Chonghai's visit was related to Jiang Xiu. Jiang Xiu's departure from the Jiang family had caused a stir in the capital's playboy circle. The 3-month agreement between Jiang Xiu and old Madame Jiang had also spread like wildfire. The Emperor of Kalin was well aware of all of this. "Greetings to the Emperor." "No need," Xue Xingjing directly asked. "Beloved official, did you come this time for young Master Jiang's matter?" Jiang Chonghai handed the paper with Jiang Xiu's initials to the attendant beside him. He said, "Young Master Jiang wrote down this resource purchase list." Xue Xingjing said, "It's just a purchase list. We thought that beloved official had encountered some problem." Jiang Chonghai thought that this was a big problem. Xue Xingjing took it and glanced over it. He said, "It's a small matter. After it's done, we will have someone send it to your residence. However, soul-devouring beasts are hard to hunt. If we immediately organize people to hunt them, it will take some time." "Did young Master Jiang say when the goods will be delivered?" Dumbfounded, completely dumbfounded. Jiang Chonghai looked at the emperor in disbelief. He felt that he had misheard. This was a prince's expenses for hundreds of years. If that wasn't enough, he would immediately organize people to hunt for the soul-devouring beast's inner core. Where did this young Master Jiang come from? Your Majesty. Jiang Chonghai was already doubting his life. Even the emperor was so fond of this mysterious young Master Jiang, but his own family still dared to make things difficult for him. Wasn't this courting death? He said tomorrow at noon. Xue Xingjing said. Tomorrow at noon. Time is a bit tight. Men immediately informed the Rain Dragon Guard's Governor Dugu Qiudao to mobilize everyone to capture the soul-devouring beast. Clang. Jiang Chonghai almost couldn't stand. What kind of joke was this? In order to capture the soul-devouring beast and satisfy young Master Jiang's request, the emperor had actually mobilized the most powerful and mysterious Rain Dragon Guard that protected the imperial city? That was an existence that would only be mobilized when there was an armed rebellion, or when the imperial city was under attack. Jiang Chonghai walked out of the imperial palace in a daze. When he entered, he thought that Jiang Xiu's list was ignorant and laughable. Who knew that he would be slapped in the face? It was too shocking. In order to satisfy young Master Jiang's request, the emperor had actually mobilized the Rain Dragon Guard. When he returned home, he immediately went to see Jiang Xiu. Unfortunately, the door to the courtyard was tightly shut. The fat servant girl opened the door and said that the young master wouldn't see anyone. 3 months. Faced with this kind of pressure, even Jiang Xiu didn't dare to slack off for a single day. The emptiness of this day made him feel empty. He thought of the resources he had spent countless efforts to gather. As the headmaster of the Tianqing school, of course he had some private savings, but those things were all in the Tianqing school. Of course he hid them well. No one could find out, but he couldn't attend the Tianqing school either. That was too dangerous. Trespassing into the Tianqing school was a capital offense. If people found out that he was Jiang Luoxia, he wouldn't have any chance of survival. As he thought of this, his resentment towards Cheng Lingsu grew even stronger. Young master, the head of the house asked me to pass on a message. He said that the matter you requested will be done as scheduled. You may leave. The sharp-chinned servant girl had no choice but to leave. She really wanted to tell the young master that her name was Wang Xinya, but she didn't have the chance. The young master didn't ask, and she couldn't find a chance to introduce herself. Until now, the young master still didn't know her name. It seems that this descendant of Xue Lingyun still respects her. This was good news for Jiang Xiu. The list of resources he had requested was a little scary and excessive, but the emperor of the Kalan Empire had agreed. 3 months was a very short period of time. If Jiang Xiu only relied on life pills, he wouldn't be able to do it. Thus he could only refine higher-grade pills, or even rarer pills that could strengthen the soul in order to increase his cultivation speed. Therefore, he needed even more valuable resources. On this day, the Jiang family seemed to be very lively. The extroverted fat servant girl went out to ask around, and found out that second Master Jiang had returned. Don't think that the one who called himself master was Jiang Chonghai's younger brother. In fact, it was the second son. The reason why he was called master was because he had become independent and joined the army. More importantly, he was the most outstanding talent in the 3rd generation of the Jiang family. He was also the target that Jiang Xiu wanted to surpass, the mid-stage of the lower heavenly immortal realm. The timing of his return at this time was very intriguing. Jiang Xiu wasn't in the mood to care about this. During this day, he didn't relax and rested his spirit. As soon as the resources arrived, he would start the joint elixir refining. He wanted to refine the life elixir. That's right, the life elixir. This was a type of elixir used by demonic cultivators to strengthen the soul. Jiang Xiu had obtained it from a great demon after killing him. It was an extremely potent elixir that was close to the point of madness. Immortals definitely wouldn't be able to withstand it. However, Jiang Xiu was a god cultivator now. He wanted to give it a try. This was a risky move. The life elixir's speed of strengthening the soul was almost twice as fast as the life elixir. If he could withstand it, then he might be able to reach the mid-stage of the lower heavenly immortal realm in a short 3 months. You're tuning in to the Earbook Haven YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.